councillors, welcome staff, members of the public and media, to this full council meeting that we're holding this afternoon. I'd like to start with apologies, of which we have none. I see everyone here, so that's great. And then if we have any requests for leave of absence that we need to know right now.
Yes. The 21st of March to 20th of April.
Okay. Any other requests for leave of absence?
Oh, yes, actually, sorry. 12th and 13th of March.
So I will move that the requests of absence are approved. Do I have somebody to second that motion? Thank you, Councillor Tucker. And we have a show of voices in favour. Aye. Against? That is carried. Next on the agenda is the declaration of conflicts of interest. And I'm aware that there are some conflicts of interest on the agenda today. I'll start off with myself. I submitted on the urban intensification variation. So the advice is that I am conflicted, and for that session I will withdraw from the table and ask that the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Smith, chairs that part of the agenda. So, Councillor Glenning.
I also have a conflict on item 4, so being a submitter.
Councillor Copeland.
Yeah, so do I. And so I'll step from the table, we'll leave the room.
Any other conflicts? As long as we're quorum for that item. Thank you, councillors. Those will be noted in the minutes. We don't need to make a resolution about that. Matters lying on the table, there's none. Special announcements. So there's a couple of things I'd like to mention. I think to record and note the passing of Mayor Shadbolt recently, and also the passing of former Mayor Councillor Radish, both of whom are well known in this region. I think it's appropriate that we record those. The other special announcement I'd like to make is that it's Mike's last full council meeting. And yeah, I think it's very appropriate to say a few words, and I know there's others that may well wish to do so. I've just got a very few points to talk about Mike, who's had 40 years of local government service with the Christchurch Country Council, for including the recovery manager role post earthquake with Hamilton Council, and obviously 10 years at Queenstown Lakes District Council, which are up next week. And even the short time that I've worked alongside Mike, to be able to see the high regard that he's held in local government sector with the expert knowledge across a range of forums. Over the 10 years, 124 council meetings. I'm waiting for the book and the high points and the low points, and I'm sure there's been many. 4 mayors, Vanessa Van Uden, Jim Bolt, Glyn Lewis, and currently myself. So in for the long game, and that's very apparent. Mike's first council meeting here took place on the 24th of February 2016. And ironically, the first public speaker who introduced himself as a Glenorchy resident business owner was me. So amazing kudos to whoever managed to dig that one out. Thank you, Jay. Thank you. So there's a lot of synergy there, isn't there? That's wonderful. Mike served obviously as the C during COVID, overseeing all Zoom-based council meetings in 2020, which came with a lot of learnings of tech. Like, did we have our trousers on? Was the cat there? Sort of the books on the bookcase. We all remember those things. The bottle of gin in the corner. I'm sure none of those happened here, but so the change that the organisation had to make during that time was significant. And Mike was part of the group observing the 2019 election coin toss, which determined the seat between Glenn Lewis and AJ Mason, who had actually already been sworn in at the inaugural meeting. And so the learning from that is that the inaugural meeting is now held after all the account periods and everything's been held. So I would say there's probably not much that you haven't seen in your 10 years, and how you've managed to keep the restraint straight and phase and sense of humour at the same time would be incredibly challenging. And I've probably got quite a lot to learn in that area going forward, and I'm sure your success as well. This has probably got to be one of the more challenging areas to do the CE role. So I'm aware that there's a couple of other people would like to say something. Quentin has indicated like to say a few words, as has Gavin. So, and then I'll see if anyone else would like to say anything at this point.
Yeah, as the longest serving councillor here, I've served most of your term and you've served all of my term. So, it's important with three different mayors, 4 different councils, and, I've always appreciated your open door and your willingness to return or take a phone call, even at strange hours, and, talk about the little things as well as the council things around the table. We've often spoken about lake swimming or my daughter's sailing or whatever else, the simple things around what's going on in our lives as well as the business of council. So no, I appreciate that and appreciate the manner in which you've undertaken the job, and wish you all the best with your retirement or semi-retirement, and hope you do get a little bit more lake swimming and those sort of things, open water swimming in your time available to you. I do recall one very entertaining phone call where I rang Mike one day and said, "Mike, I want to buy Mount Iron." He sort of went, "What?" But to his credit and to the Mayor Jim's credit at the time, they took that and ran with it, and over a period of time were able to execute it. Now, we as councillors often come up with the ideas or the whatever, but we don't undertake the work that takes to execute things, and so I do really appreciate that. So thank you.
Mine's just a very quick thank you as well. I've obviously only benefited from the last 3 years of your 40 years of experience, but it has been very beneficial. It's always good guidance to keep us on the right track, and I appreciate that you are charged with doing the work that a group of councillors directs, and there's often a lot of criticism in the media and so forth, and you're unable to really speak against that. But in my view, you've done the job very, very well. So thank you very much.
John.
Yeah, Mike, it's been in particular, it's been pleasing to be working with you the last couple of months, and the advice that you've provided to us in some challenging situations has been really helpful. So thank you for that. But you and I go back a long way into other challenging contexts in Canterbury before, during and after the earthquakes. And you were in a really difficult position then, and I appreciated what you tried to do to bring out good outcomes for the communities, Christchurch in particular, but wider Canterbury too. So thank you for that. I wish you all the best for what you go to next. Cheers.
I didn't know I was going to be speaking today, but just off the cuff, because it's a little nice warm place. I learn a lot from Mike and his intestinal fortitude. I think one of the driving factors for me being in this position was trying to find a sense of direction and purpose and carry the heavy rock as far as I could. And I feel like you couldn't have chosen a heavier rock, and you've carried it a hell of a long way. And I think the legacy that you leave behind is not only in the work that is there, but the team as well. So I'm incredibly grateful for the service for our district in the last decade, and how you leave us in a great place. So thank you very much.
So at the end of that, I have a bouquet of flowers, and I still don't know why that's the tradition compared to a box of beers. I perhaps stand a little chance if I'm receiving them, but anyway, just on behalf of the elected representatives, to put them to take home and enjoy it. Thank you, councillors. So we now move to the public forum, and we have 3 minutes per speaker. And the first person to speak is Florence McCarroll. Thank you.
Tenakoto, ko Florence Tokuingua, no Wanaka Aho. I come here to speak for the trees with love, for all the trees to protect them. So we all know the essential ecosystem services trees do, the habitat and food for biodiversity, regulation of air, wind, water, temperature, carbon capture for climate change mitigation, and people's well-being and resilience. And we all know trees take a long time to grow. Yet we have all noticed that too many trees are being felled, like on Orchard Road in Wanaka. Planned intensification will further condemn precious urban trees. So I am asking the QLDC to protect all trees now. The solution is to strengthen the existing tree policy, integrating all trees, whether they grow on public or private land, whether they are native or exotic. I suggest the council to pass a moratorium on felling trees while we discuss it. Ban clear felling, burn-offs, monoculture. Support arborists to learn how to manage them rather than fell them. Stop the Ely Point forest plan, which received much public opposition. Reject the golf course application to destroy a major windbreak of 650 trees. And generally foster a fun culture to cherish trees and nature. Protecting trees is free. It's a key to creating a low-carbon, biodiverse society. In Wanaka, only 14 trees are protected outside of Wanaka Station Park and Montesparing Road. All the other trees, most of them exotic, are at stake. But I see trees as important living beings, and I want them to stand for their lifespan, often more than 100 years. Mr. Mayor, as a candidate, you declared your intention to balance growth and sustainability. Nicola, I was pleased to hear you were going to bring sustainability here, and I'm sure many of you love trees. So I respectfully ask you to read an article about tree protection that I've shared with Jane. And I hope you take pleasure in our urban trees and remember them when you make decisions. Please advise whom I should contact to go to further this discussion. Namahe. Thank you.
Next speaker for public forum is Peter Newport.
I'll time myself, John, just to keep things under control, but here we go. I thank you to everybody for the opportunity to speak today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Peter Newport. I'm the founder and editor of Crux, which was launched in 2018. The reason I'm speaking today is that councillors in the community probably are aware of the crisis in journalism, but may not be aware of the extent to which this is affecting our ability to cover local government. Some statistics for you. In the United States, 3,000 community newspapers have closed in recent years. Over 250 papers have closed in the UK. Over 200 papers have closed in Australia. There are now 27 councils in Australia with no news coverage whatsoever. These are news deserts. So in New Zealand, we have over 30 papers closed in just late 2024. And in New Zealand, we're down to 800 qualified journalists after having about 4,000 journalists only 10 years ago. We are organising a local news summit in March this year to create a forum where this issue can be discussed. And we've invited both QLDC and CODC through the Mayor and Interim Chief Exec. We're very grateful to Rod Drury for the use of his local facility. But before the summit, we want to request an urgent change in the way that the QLDC supports local media. Our view is that council support should be determined by a number of clear, data-focused factors in order to produce the best and most cost-effective result for ratepayers in these tough financial times. Fortunately, digital media can be measured very accurately and easily for the key measures that a council needs. These are summed up with two words: reach and engagement. How many people read content and how closely do they engage with that content? We've over 1 million Facebook views a month, over 45,000 unique users, 400,000 ad impressions a month, and 5,500 Substack subscribers. We can produce between 1,500 and 2,000 responses to community surveys within as short a period as 48 hours, with hundreds of IP addressed checked comments. An example of just how serious the local news media crisis is has become clear recently on the West Coast. The Buller District Council moved in late 2024 to move all of its advertising to the West Coast Messenger, and that reduced the Westport News, which is 150 years old, to just mandatory notices and brought them to the brink of closure. Fortunately, council has intervened. Recently, the mayor over there, incidentally, has decided not to talk to journalists at all, in particular the Westport News. So all we're asking for is our fair share of QLDC marketing and advertising budget based on audited reach and engagement. More importantly, we are keen to discuss with the new mayor and interim CEO ways in which local news media can play a vital role in a healthy, open and independent relationship with the community. Our pledge to QLDC is that money raised in this way will go towards hiring trained, qualified journalists. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Professor Boyle.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name is Brian Boyle. I'm a retired professional astronomer and a Gippsland resident. I volunteer across the district promoting astronomy, dark skies and public education. Queenstown Lakes is one of the best places on Earth for dark skies, and access to a global astrotourism market worth in 2024 $2 billion US, growing at 15% per annum. We sit within just 0.1% of the world's inhabited land, where people can regularly see the brightest regions of the Milky Way, as my lovely assistant here will show us, and the Aurora Australis. Who cannot be impressed by the quality of our photographers on Facebook every time an aurora goes off? We are the only place globally with not just one, but two international dark sky places within an hour's drive of an international airport. Our, frankly, wonderful lighting strategy, Southern Light, supports dark sky compliant lighting, and the district plan already protects night sky views in rural zones. Yet despite this, we're losing our dark sky. Satellite data shows that in just the last 2 years, Queenstown Light Dome, and that of Warwick and that of Cromwell, have increased by around 40%, imperiling the district's first international dark sky place. This isn't driven by bad intent. It's driven by volume, complexity, and a common misconception that any light is good light. This is in fact reinforced at the national level by the Resources Management Act, which to me, bewilderingly, doesn't even acknowledge the sky as a resource alongside land and water in Section 3. In reality, poorly designed lighting wastes energy, creates glare, undermines safety, and damages both development and dark sky. Good lighting is good for development and good for this natural resource. Development and dark sky can go hand in hand with good lighting. So the great news is this is solvable. I'm proposing today that council establish a dark sky task force, bringing together council, communities, iwi, DOC and the NZTA, focused on education, coordination and practical guidance. The very act of forming this group alone would send a powerful signal that QLDC values dark sky as a shared community and economic asset. An early focus of this could be saving the Kawarau Gibbston International Dark Sky Park, which you could readily do by simply moving into the docklands to the north and south and bringing in communities from Kingston to Lake Halia. Longer term, connecting this with the Tahuna Glenorchy Dark Sky Sanctuary would position Queenstown Lakes as one of the most significant dark sky destinations in the world. Ultimately, this is a shared responsibility at all levels, national, district, and community. Primarily, it's about education. Mayor, I have this wonderful view. 500,000 visitors internationally come through our airport. You see signs for throwing yourself off bridges, climbing mountains. What you don't see is anything to do with the night sky. I would love to see a little ticker tape at the top there with the aurora forecast, the daily forecast and the snow forecast, embedding the sky in the other assets we value so deeply and bring us so much return. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Third.
We should go third.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good afternoon, councillors. I speak as someone who was involved in the recruitment process for the CE 10 years ago. And I've had a front row seat during Mike's time and would like to publicly thank him for his commitment to local government, and as we've heard, not only with QLDC, but also the Hamilton City Council, the Hastings District Council, Christchurch City Council, and I believe even the Ministry of Works. I do not speak for all councillors, but for a large number, including some of those who are no longer with us, and thanking you, Mike, for your knowledge and guidance, whether it be the good, the bad, or the ugly, which helps guide councillors in their decision-making, understanding of process, and the filling in of gaps around information. And when appropriate over the years, I've sought conversation with you to find out more about the man behind the job, to break up the daily local government grind and just have those real human interactions, namely around running, swimming, Golden Bay, Hamner Springs, and family, as we shared the passing of your father and my brother last year. And I know the role that family plays in yours and Janet's life. I worked hard on building working relationships with staff during my time on council and slowly understood the high respect and regard that you were held in, the culture you fostered and the support you provided, which in today's climate is not really known or acknowledged. But I know there are many, and most in this room, and various council officers who will agree in understanding the huge demands of the role and your time spent 24/7. A common theme was how hard you have worked for the district in the CE role. The job has been described as sometimes lonely, at times invisible, maybe not so in this market. You have to absorb blame, make unpopular decisions, and constantly manage risks, but that's the job. Who would want it? In my opinion, I would say QLDC was very, very fortunate to have you for the time that they had. Mike, I think you know my favourite quote from the late Muhammad Ali that has helped to drive me in my time in this community. And I will share it because it epitomises not only Mike, but also a lot of people sitting in the chambers today. Service to others is the rent we pay for our room here on earth. And Mike, you've paid the most rent of anybody by far. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Our speeches during the last 7 years were mostly based on the 2019 IPCC report that was leaving space for hope if we halved our emissions before 2030. But we have failed. Emissions have kept rising, so now we cannot avoid experiencing catastrophic consequences anymore. We have created a world in which millions already die every year because we didn't act, and we are on track to kill billions in the coming decades. If you have watched the summary of the UK National Emergency Briefing I sent you, you will know that it isn't just activists and scientists saying so anymore, but also emergency response specialists and military experts. So we can't avoid catastrophe anymore, but we can still try to mitigate it to save what can be saved. To do so, though, we need to understand how we got here. If after 40 years of warnings, we are still failing to take any meaningful action, it is because no one has been willing to face their own responsibilities. Global leaders, international negotiators, scientists, the public, even climate activists, everyone has been trying to get someone else to solve this crisis for them. This is not how it works. We are causing this crisis, and unless we change our ways, we are doomed. Here are the basics we need to change. We need to stop burning fossil fuels. We need to consume less stuff, we need to reduce waste, and we need to take family planning really seriously. But to stop burning fossil fuels is a condition for anything else to have any impact. You might ask yourselves, why am I coming to the council to tell you what individuals need to do? Well, it is because as councillors, you have even more responsibilities than the rest of us. It is your duty to make the community aware of the situation, and it is your duty to help reduce the district's emissions. There are certainly some good initiatives happening, especially around electrification, but time has run out and we now need much more radical actions. For example, you might not have the power to simply ban fossil fuels in the district, but you have consenting powers. You can use them to make it really hard to use fossil fuels in the district. Then there is the big one. The previous council agreed to spend hundreds of millions to increase the airport's pollution by 30%. We will all suffer the consequences from this decision. This airport causes 90% of the emissions in the district. Its traffic must be reduced, not increased. We are living through dark times. The climate collapse is accelerating. We are passing many tipping points as our ecosystems wither and die, while the fossil fuel industry is bringing back fascism in democracies in order to try to cling on to their power. We are living in a time where a lack of leadership will cost us the earth. We hope that you will be able to rise to the challenge and to lead a rapid decarbonization of the district. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's the end of our public forum this afternoon. And so we now move to confirming the agenda for this meeting, and the resolution which I'm going to move is that the agenda be confirmed with the addition of a motion, which will be added at the beginning of the meeting. That the reason that the notice of motion was not on the agenda is that the documentation was not completed until after the agenda had been published, but it cannot be delayed until a future meeting because the notice of motion was submitted in accordance with standing orders and so should be considered at this meeting. So that is the resolution that I'd like to move. I have a seconder to move that confirmation of the agenda. Thank you, John. So put the resolution to confirm the agenda to council. All in favour? Aye. Against? Okay, that is carried. Confirmation of the minutes. The draft minutes of the public part of the ordinary meeting of our last full council meeting, which have been circulated, attached to the agenda. We've received no comments or observations today, but I will put that the minutes of the public part of the ordinary meeting of the Queenstown Lakes District Council on the 27th of the last year be confirmed as a true and accurate record.
Just one little correction.
Yep.
On page 10. The top of the page goes up to item 11 of the resolution of the next point. It's not numbered and should be noted as item number 12.
It's on page
10 of the agenda of the whole. So it's the resolution for item 1 of the 27.
so missing a paragraph number 12.
The paragraph's there, it's just not numbered as one of the resolutions.
Yes. So. Got that recorded. Okay, is there any other comments on the agenda? Thank you for picking that one up. So I've moved, is there a seconder for that resolution? Thank you, councillor Bartlett. In favour?
Aye.
Against? So that is carried. And then we have the draft minutes of the public part of the extraordinary meeting that was held on the 23rd of January. And the resolution is that the minutes of the public part of the extraordinary meeting of the meeting held on the 23rd of January are confirmed as a true and correct record. I will move that. Thank you, councillor Mitchell, seconding. Is there any discussion? Okay, I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? That is carried. Thank you. So the item on the agenda is the notice of motion regarding the chief executive delegation. As chair, I will call councillor Gladding to move that motion. So,
Thanks. And I just want to thank staff for the assistance with this and apologise for it coming in, at the last minute before deadline. It's been really helpful, and Mike actually sent through a very helpful email around process with notices of motion, which makes it clear that you can't change it after it's been put. So before putting it, the motions sitting there for councillors to see, I just thought maybe it would be worth having some discussion before it's put, in case there are any additional changes that councillors might like to suggest.
okay, so are you moving the motion?
Well, I think we can have a discussion before we move it, because once we've moved it, I think was always incorrect in.
No, once it's moved, it can't be
Yeah.
amended, so there is an opportunity for you to amend it, so it can't be amended by a vote, but it does require the majority of councillors in the meeting to agree with any changes.
Yeah, I guess maybe the thing is, does anybody have any questions about the motion before?
Does it need to be moved
Before
as an amended motion before we can discuss it?
No, but once it's moved, it has to be voted on as moved.
But we can discuss it before it's
The standing orders are silent on that, so it assumes that there can be discussion, but only councillor Gladding can nominate it to move a change to it.
Can I ask a question? Sure. What was because it did come in late and there was a lot of other things to concentrate, I haven't really had a lot of time.
Yeah.
So can you please explain to me what the reason for bringing it was? Because I did actually think that we had a workshop planned for this.
Yeah, and that's what I was hoping. So the reason I brought it was, one, I've obviously been here for 6 years and we haven't done a comprehensive review or reaffirmed the chief executive delegation. So that was in the 6 years that I've been here. So earlier this year, I asked the question and said, look, maybe this is the case. Best practice is probably that we review it. Is there a review scheduled? And the reply I got was that it was reviewed the previous year, March 2025. But what we did in March 2025 was sort of amend, I think it was just the financial delegation. So we lifted that because obviously costs have gone up. But the financial delegation is just one part of it. So the way the delegation works, I'm sorry if you already know this, you probably do, but it's a broad delegation that we give the chief executive to basically do everything that we can do under a variety of statutes, bar the things that the statutes don't allow us to delegate to the chief executive. We don't have, ours was established in 2014 and there aren't many limits to it. We haven't ever gone through that process of looking at the various powers that we have delegated in the past and going, do we need some limitations on those? And there's no review clause in it, which is presumably why we haven't done a holistic review. So anyway, there were a load of reasons why it would be a good idea to do it. I don't think staff have pushed back at all. This is just
No, I
about,
guess that was my question, because I guess my
Yeah.
question was, there was a workshop planned for this.
no, there wasn't.
There was, I mean, there
Or
was
in
no
the work
specific, but I mean, we have discussed with the mayor, we did receive this from council planning, the opportunity to do that, so we can do that, and obviously if council resolves that, we will do that. I just wanted to make one clarification, and apologies that it was only yesterday my brain clicked into gear. We did undertake a review in 2024, wasn't a substantive review, but it was a check that that Wind Williams undertook to check the consistency of our delegations along with other councils, and there were some updates as a result. So it wasn't to be clear, it wasn't a review that says, do we want this delegation? It was a question that said, are the delegations consistent with what other councils are doing? So we did undertake that. Apologies, I only remembered that yesterday and just confirmed with Brendan that that had been done.
Yeah, I recall something around that as well. And look, there are reviews around various powers. So every time, something goes down with the RMA, because Mike can't sub-delegate to officers, we will get papers come on just that part of the delegation so that we can agree those delegations to officers. But it has become a situation where when the officers need additional powers, it will come to the meeting when they can't be granted by the chief executive. But there's never been, since 2014, when it was adopted, a look at whether there need to be some additional limits in certain areas. And just the structure of it as well. I know Christchurch City Council, they go into quite a lot of detail around each act for the chief executive. They set out the powers specifically under each act. We don't do that. We do it for officers, but not for the CA. Anyway, so I mean, basically I brought it because staff had not responded to my query about whether it was, or they had responded but had not said, yes, it's scheduled. And I know because we're so busy, unless something is agreed by the council formally, because you can't be directed by one elected member, it often doesn't happen and it often gets delayed if we don't set a date. So this is just about making sure it definitely happens before the onboarding of a new chief executive, and the date was set by staff, so that I'm assuming aligns with resourcing.
Thank you. So we can discuss after it's moved?
If there's.
I'll talk now then.
Yeah, you can
If
debate
any
it after it's
Thank you.
moved, but you can't discuss it with a view to change what's
No,
possible.
fine. Thank you for that, Mike. Yeah, I think it's very timely. I think, my goodness, has a lot changed since 2014, let alone even last year. So I think it's a really good opportunity for council to take ownership of this, to help smooth the way for the even the interim CE, but certainly the substantive CE, just so that we know and we're confident that they are working in a space with the delegations that they need, and that we understand what they're doing against the various pieces of legislation, rather than the relatively general approach, which is expeditious, but we will have more oversight if we go through this process. What I like about what Nikki's proposed as well is that it's not seeking a legal review of are the delegations appropriate legally. It's more a governance review. What are the things that we should be delegating to the chief executive, and that the chief executive can then delegate to others, and more of a governance sense from our perspective to make sure that the management of this organisation is as effective and efficient as it can be, but we need to be able to see that. So I think this is an opportunity.
I think, yeah, I'll come to you in a second, councillor. So what I heard previously, in fact, going back to our very early induction from Vern and Steve, was that, that need to review some of this stuff. And I think because they do get dated. The fundamental question in terms of our delegations is it will reflect ultimately our appetite for risk in what we wish to keep as councillor decisions and what things may be delegated, and that will probably depend on what's happening at the time and over the years. So I think the what and the why are reasonably well understood. What is the process? Why are we doing it? The when
again, the best practice, which is yes, if there is a new incumbent coming in into a substantive CE role, then it's timely to do that work to sort of set up that relationship between council and the individual in the best possible way. And I guess it comes down to the how. And I think this is just looking at you have two options on the notice of motion. I've got in front of me where it says sort of 2 or 2, so whether those alternatives.
Right.
So they would come back to that one. But yeah, so it's I think it comes down to the how is this done? We're not all going to sit and work through 500 pages of delegations, but do we take advice? When I discussed it with the chief executive, what I heard back was that there is capability from staff to work as part of this process and within the time frame that was being suggested. And there's a number of ways that could happen. Obviously, as councillors, we don't have a procurement budget, so we wouldn't be going out and doing our own procurement for external advice, but there's different ways that the organisation could help bring that advice into the process, whether that's workshop or whatever. So just really speaking to that, and I would echo Councillor Gladding's point that the suggestion has been very constructively responded to. But if you'd just like to speak to the number 2 or number 2.
Right, so this you want to say something before I speak to those?
I maybe just speak, if that's okay, through the chair.
Sorry.
Notice of motions are always quite tricky because they're always last minute and it's hard to sort of work around it. And anyway, we have been some backwards and forwards over the last 24 hours to work this out. And basically to summarise my perspective on this is there's 2 points to the motion. One is to agree to a review of the delegations of the CE. I'm happy with that, and I think that's appropriate given where we're at. But the second part of the motion is about how we do it, and I don't think we have had the opportunity as a full council to be able to have that discussion. And so what I suggested to Councillor Gladding is that we review that point 2. So I'll leave it there for now, and I'll decide what Nikki is going to do because I cannot amend your motion.
So yeah.
Thank you. Oh,
sorry.
Councillor Bartlett, I've got a question too. So the review part, you've got to be completed by June 2026. Would the review that's being proposed just be stage 1, where there's a review of the actual delegations? Some will be straightforward to carry on. Some might be a council decision whether we want them to be delegated or not, and others might be ones that we're not sure about. What I guess is the question is, are you expecting to see all those delegations either cancelled or reconfirmed by 2026, or that then gets us to a point where, with a new chief executive, we can work with them to see what's appropriate to be delegated?
I think the
So
intent,
it does depend.
yeah, I think the intent was to bring it back to a council meeting and agree. But in saying that, council Long's suggestion of having a workshop where we can sit and talk about this a little bit more because it's very last minute. I think that's the way forward. So, and answer the question, I don't know if you saw the new point 2 that we worked through, but the new point 2 is that council directs the CE to schedule a workshop to discuss the scope of the review and any independent or internal advice required by councillors. And I think that would be an opportunity to talk more broadly about how we want to make this work, because the council hasn't done it since 2014. So we're kind of new to this, and advisors may be able to help us. I'm open.
I haven't got that one, the one that's on my board. This is obviously the first one, I think, so I don't know whether
Yeah, I don't-
would up on the
That's
screen.
Yeah,
would you like to just slowly repeat that point 2?
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So the new point 2 is, this was worked through with Matt, councillor, the council directs the CE to schedule a workshop to discuss the scope of the review and any independent or internal advice required by councillors.
I think
And that hasn't been
that
put-
answers probably the questions that we've heard.
We've just, it's about keeping it really open so that,
But you won't repeat that, just wait.
I can repeat that, sorry, John. Directs the CE to schedule a workshop to discuss the scope of the review and any independent or internal advice required by councils.
I'll just make one suggestion on the basis of that, because you've effectively predicated that by saying the whole task must be completed by June 26. I'm wondering whether you dropped that requirement, but perhaps set a time frame for the workshop, so that, because you don't know exactly what the scope of the work that you're going to commission is.
I guess my counter to that would be, how do we then put a date by which, because we can't direct you as individuals or via workshop. Is it just a case of making sure it happens amongst a whole lot of other work that the staff are doing? And I know that if we set a day, it gets prioritised to be done relatively, quickly by that date. And that was what I mentioned to staff. And
It's your notice of motions.
Yeah,
So
so-
wherever you want.
yeah, I
Well-
do want to put a date on it. I don't mind if that date goes out a bit, but I want a date.
I think my concern would be that you're asking the organisation to conclude something by June, but you haven't actually agreed the scope. So it's not to try and extend it, but I would rather and I understand it would be, if you wanted to have an end date, I would perhaps suggest you use something like, prior to the appointment of the, new CEO, because that gives you and staff some greater flexibility to deliver this. Because whilst it can be done, the more that staff are constrained to do this, the more other tasks will need to be
I don't have an
sacrificed.
issue with that date, as long as we don't delay the appointment of the new CEO to accommodate the time
No,
frame.
that would be, yeah.
But
It also
it's
risks
really-
if we employ the new CEO quicker.
Okay.
right, so.
Councillor Brent would like to say something.
I'm just concerned around the timing of all of this, and mainly because we only received this at the very last minute on Tuesday afternoon. I was out of action yesterday, as you know, and I really haven't had a chance to consider this vis-a-vis the whole CE selection process as well. I'm curious as to whether a process had already begun to review from a legal perspective, given all the laws that are changing on us already. So that was probably a question for Mike. And probably another question for Mike is around timing for this, because I haven't got my head around whether this should be done before or after a new CE is appointed. Because part of me feels that it almost should be a bit of a tandem process, because if you limit the delegations so strictly, that might restrict the people that apply, for example. So I really haven't had a chance to think through the pros and cons of this timing of this, and I'm a bit annoyed that it came so last minute.
Thank you for your opinion. Mike, did you want to respond to?
So to your first point, yes, we will be, with the new RM or the replacement resource management legislation, we will be starting some work to identify what are the delegations that will be required to give effect to that. And obviously, we don't yet understand what might happen in the simplifying local government or the rates capping or other processes which are in train, so that they could also require some delegation. In terms of when you do that, in some respects, I think that's a little bit of a choice for council. I do personally think there is some advantage in engaging on new CE in that conversation, but I absolutely accept that some may see that there's an advantage in making sure that the new CE knows exactly what the delegations are being offered. At the end of the day, my expectation is most CEs will expect the level of delegation, because otherwise the management of the day-to-day business of the council will just be completely glued up. And I think the first people that will resent that will be the councillors around this table. Yeah.
Any more questions? So,
John, if I can speak again, just very briefly on that point about the timing of it, I would hope that June date would be consistent with where we're thinking of having a CE appointed. If anything, it could be both, it could be by the end of June or earlier. So fit with the appointment of a new CE, but I think June's reasonable.
Okay, I'll put it to the councillor whether you're going to move your motion.
Right, so I'm going to move the motion, and I'm going to move that the council agrees to conduct a review of all delegations held by the chief executive, including delegations jointly held with the mayor or deputy mayor by June 2026. And the new point 2, sorry, up there, so not what's in the papers, but what we've put on the screen, which is about holding a workshop to discuss the detail. So I'll just speak to that. You know, the government's always.
Do you want to second that?
Oh, sorry, the executive first.
I'm just referring, so it needs to, apologies, just the nuances of the standing orders on this. Okay, so standing order 26.4, only the mover at the time of the notice of motion is moved, and with the agreement of the majority of those present at the meeting may alter the proposed notice of motion. So the way I read that is that irrespective of how you might ultimately vote on it, you're required to signal to Councillor Gladding that you're accepting her amending her notice of motion before she puts it.
Yeah.
Could we?
It doesn't, so it's not a substantive merits.
Yeah.
It's just an acceptance from the majority by a show of hands, so it's not a vote, that you're happy that she chooses to amend this.
And on
Show of hands, but not a vote.
Okay,
Not a
well,
vote.
let's just do the show of hands.
That looks like the majority of people.
Right, and we haven't put it yet, so do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to push it out from June to give the organisation a little bit more time. So I'm going to say by end of August 2026. And I'm sorry for not doing that initially, but it gives us just a bit more breathing room.
Oh, we won't ask her. We need to
What I will say is thank you for listening. So are we formally moving?
But you need to think about.
Yeah, well,
We've got to see.
formally moving as
And I'm just going to,
amended by acceptance of councillors. Yeah, as a seconder, councillor Mitchell.
and look, just a couple of words to Mike's point, I don't want to labour it, but the legislation is always going to change, so we're always going to be doing reviews. So this is about a more holistic, chunky review that dives a little bit deeper, that looks at restructuring the way we frame the delegation so that it gives more clarity and transparency. Once we've done that big piece, then there will obviously always need to be ongoing reviews.
Thank you. Is there any discussion from councillors?
I'm happy to go. Look, fundamentally, I don't think this notice of motion is fundamentally necessary because we're in a process of recruiting a new executive, reviewing the KPIs and things like that. I think it would have happened organically this year, but with that in mind, I will support it, but I think we need to be careful that, you know, we should have been able to achieve this organically through engagement as we move forward with this process, but I will support.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor White.
While I do support a review of the delegations, I can't support this notice of motion. I don't think it's timely, and I do think even with the extension of August, the notice of motion is too restrictive because I do think we need to be more flexible around the appointment of the new chief executive and how this might work. This came to us very late on a reasonably heavy week with a very heavy agenda item, especially for me. So I haven't had enough time to review, and I just don't believe I've got enough information to make this decision, and that I believe is not good governance, so I will not be supporting it.
Councillor Wong.
Thank you. I had a little bit to do with the shaping, I guess, of point two there. So I feel obligated a little bit here to support it. But I probably echo Councillor Smith's or Mayor Smith's words there that I don't believe this should have been a notice of motion. You know, when there's trust between staff and elected members, we should be able to get this done just in our normal work process. So yeah, I guess for this future council, I think we need to have a better trust with our staff to be able to work with them better than having to do these notice motions, especially for this sort of content.
Okay, well, I'll put this to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Aye. Those against? That motion is carried.
My vote records, Jane.
Yep. Item 1 on our agenda. Adoption of the committee terms and references meeting schedule. We have sure who for that. Thank you. So we have a report presented in terms of references, terms of reference for the standing committees and the schedule of meetings for us to adopt for the council. The want to include the community board and the standing committees. I'm aware that the terms of references have been worked through with chairs, so thank you staff and thank you chairs of committees for your work in that. And I think in sort of leading the introduction to this item, I think it's important to note that, and it's not here in the resolution, but probably for noting for the minutes that this is a new structure and that at some point we'll need to see how well that's working, and so it'd be quite normal perhaps after halfway through the term, or earlier if chairs are finding that those items that aren't clearly aligning with the terms of reference or aren't clear where they should fall, to really note that we will be revisiting that as required. So really with that preface, I'll have that over to staff to talk to the report.
And we're looking for the newspaper as read and answer any questions.
Excellent.
No.
Okay, there we go. We'll go with councillors.
Yeah, thank you. And excuse me, because I can't recall exactly how it was worded in the previous versions, as you can imagine. So I'm just looking at some of the powers to act. For instance, Smart Growth Committee will approve the adoptions of strategies, policies and plans relating to the activity. And similarly, obviously the infrastructure one has a similar one, approve the strategies, plans that relate. So what I'm unclear of is which policy strategies and plans are the place of full council and which are the ones when there's overlapping jurisdiction, who has the authority? And I'm trying to think in real terms here, but is the spatial plan, for instance, within the scope of the smart growth, because is both a plan and a strategy potentially, is it within the scope of the smart growth committee, or is it entirely reserved for the full council? And you could say the same for other policies and plans, but that was an example.
Yeah, no, and that's a good example where obviously the Gen 2, the next strategy will be a strategic document. It will be a matter of chairs and the GM responsible to work through those answers. And the most important thing is that we're not duplicating work for elected members. So where there's a need to kind of test and tease out the governance response to something, then we can do that through a committee. It's a very useful way of doing that, as you know. In the event where something is a more dedicated piece of work that's clearly an accountability of full council, then we may be workshopping and bringing that to full council. But there is definitely value, and I think throughout the terms of reference, you will see where we've picked up that there will be work that those various committees will do.
Can
Yeah,
undertake.
yeah.
So it's a judgment call as to whether the thing is of sufficient significance to come to full council or the individual committee. Is that what you're saying? Or except where they're, you know, an RMA appeal, for instance, sits within the planning committee quite clearly.
It is a
Whereas
judgment call, although I've not been close, I haven't actually had a committee, although I've been closely aligned to them. I don't know if any of my, there's someone to help.
It is indeed a judgment call, used judiciously. So, in the previous, the different name of the committee would consider things and as a group consider whether full council should have eyes over this and a vote for it as they report back to full council on decisions that are made in those committees. That's a better way of controlling what those decisions are and having a reasonable approach to what decisions should be made within the committee structure to the wider council structure.
What's the?
If there was a misalignment, for example, with what the committee considered to be reasonable and the council did not, when it's reported back to the council of course, then they change this, what the delegations may be if they think it's in.
Was this significantly different to the wording of the previous version? No, so okay, that gives me some comfort that we are getting the level of allocation right, if you like, between the committees and the full council. So in that regard, it's business as usual, I think.
Councillor Bartlett.
Point of clarification, the wording says approve the adoption of strategies, policies and plans that relate to any activity area listed above where authorised by the council. So it's not a judgment call. It's if there is a strategy or policy within the scope of, you know, that committee's terms of reference, it's up to the council to authorise them to make the approval or not. Otherwise,
we can certainly delegate things to the committees. So
it's not a judgment call of staff. It's a judgment call of the council as to whether they want the committee to approve any policies or strategies. That's how I read it.
I don't think we said it was a judgment call of staff.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is there is no ability for the committees to approve strategies or policies unless specifically authorised by the council. I'm checking.
It's interpretive though, as
What does it mean
whether
by
it's within the
authorised?
activity areas.
What does it mean by where authorised?
As I said, I'm sorry.
I think we just should have one person speaking at a time because there will be people trying to watch and also the recording. So we have a question of the interpretation. I don't think that should be necessarily at this stage a deal breaker for whether we move forward, or do we need to clarify that now? Am I hearing?
I think it is quite big, because if we have a discussion here and it's agreed that the interpretation is loose and that, you know, some strategies can be approved by committees, then that's problematic. So what does it mean by we're authorised by the council? That's the question. I don't know whether we need legal advice or what we need, but we need to all have the same understanding, I guess.
Whilst people are thinking about that, I'm going to come to Councillor Bartlett.
All right, well, mine's pretty minor. It's quite a little typo that I can't get past. Now I've seen it. On page 45, sorry. On page 45, halfway down the page, under the risk management, it's got assist the councils with apostrophes. I think it should just be council. Very minor.
Yeah. Assist the council to determine its appetite for it. Yep. Great spot there. Thank you. John, you were in, sorry, Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following up on that discussion about the approval of strategies, plans, etc. I because it is used throughout several of these terms of reference, I think there's actually a need to be clearer about that. Now, how we go about that? Do we need to put an amendment, or can we just suggest that? Because in some of them, in the asset and infrastructure committee, it's got recommend the adoption of strategies, policies and plans that relate. So it's recommend to council. I think we need to be clear where there is a distinction. So if the respective committee has been delegated authority to approve a plan, strategy or whatever, fine, let them do so. I think there needs to be another dot point that says, as with the asset infrastructure policy, recommend to council on
plans, strategies, etc. That have been delegated to them for that purpose. So they're two very different things. One is approving it, the other one is looking at it and focus at the committee, then recommending back to council. I think it would be helpful. But now and future,
It's in the same wordings in there anyway.
not
Under
for
power
that.
under power to recommend in the Smart Growth Committee, it says recommend the adoption of strategies, et cetera, where the final decision must be made by the council.
Thank you. In that case, yeah, go on.
I'm not too sure what the, I do understand what you're saying there, Nikki, but I'm not sure what the problem is that we're trying to solve. I mean, inevitably, most strategies and policies will come to full council. The committees are used to guide and assist and give governance, input into the development of those strategies and policies. And I was just trying to think of any strategy or policy that had actually not gone to full council, and I cannot think of one. So I think we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist.
I think the wording's fine, just that it means, I think, sorry to speak out, I think it gives the full council flexibility to get rid of that job if they want to, but I think they have to get rid of it at a meeting and say, we're going to hand that over to the infrastructure committee to approve. I think that's what we're authorising the council.
And I think that it's a bit of a safety mechanism, because at the end of the day, and I mean this respectfully, you wouldn't want a committee to go a little bit rogue, well intended, and adopt a strategy or a policy that full council had not had eyes over or had any input to. So that's not actually, the general hierarchy that is imposed here, and not the intention.
No, it's covered.
Yeah, I think.
And look, as I said, I comfort that the way that we've had it has been working in terms of this. No one's been making road decisions around committees or various things, and as inherently as governance, our job is to make policy and to and those sort of things. So as long as that, and as I said, I can't comfort that it's working as
Very well understood.
Yeah, so that's good.
Something to contextualise is trying to think of committees versus policies, and as community services, we went through a very thorough and rigorous process through the tree policy, and I think
that one popped into my head.
Yeah, very appropriate for the committee itself to be faced with that. But I think in general, there's been nothing that's been untoward or that would warrant any concern around the way that this is structured in my mind. So I'm happy to move. Thank you.
Okay, any discussion? Okay. In favour? Show.
Aye.
That is carried, thank you.
We actually moved and seconded.
Yeah,
Yes, we
yeah,
have.
it's very.
It's really one of
Councillor Tucker.
You're gonna be quick. You wanted to say something?
Yeah.
Not a big quick.
Okay, item 2 on the agenda is a retrospective agreement of the remuneration authority submission, and who will.
Again, we're just happy to take this paper as read. I think we've circulated the material. Questions have been asked, so hopefully it's all pretty straightforward and well understood at this point.
Any questions from councillors?
Happy to move.
I was just going to say, I think I said the same thing last time round, is that you have to make it clear that the pool is set by another authority, and we have to allocate it all. So we've
Is
got
that a
such,
question or?
got such limited ability. So I just want to confirm that that is correct.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. But you're moving?
Yeah.
Okay, can I have a seconder? Thank you, councillor White. I'll put that motion to council. Those in favour, please. Okay. Those against? That is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice product here.
Item 3 on our agenda is the relation to the establishment of the Water Services Council Control Organisation, and the subject matter is in relation to selection, appointment, and level of and skill set for the directors that council intends to recruit to set up this organisation. So I shall pass this over to Penny. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. So this paper sets out a series of recommendations, as me and Glover pointed out, about the decisions to be made so that we can move forward with appointing the board at the first stage in establishing the Water Services CCO. The recommendations hopefully are all in line with the direction from the workshop on the 22nd of January. These are all the same areas that we talked through, and we went through in detail in that session the rationale around them, which set out in the paper. So the key decision points are around agreeing to a one-off approach for the CCO outside of the updating the policy, which gives us the ability to have a bespoke process for the establishment of an entire board rather than having to update the policy to both reflect a whole new board as well as individual director replacements before we do that. To establish an appointment panel of, we've recommended 5 people for you to nominate today who the members of that are. And that panel would then conduct the process for appointment of the board as set out, with the duties set out in the policy, starting with the agreement of the skills matrix. That the skills matrix would be in a separate document not built into the constitution, and that there would be a staggered appointment process after the first term to ensure there's continuity.
Perfect. Right. Questions? Start with Councillor Kaplan.
Thank you, it's really neat. Thanks, Penny, and good to see that the paper did reflect the thinkings that came out of the workshop, so thank you. You've recommended a panel of 5. Are you married to that number?
So we had some discussions internally, because I think in the workshop we had talked about 3 to 5, and we thought less than 5 was not enough to get diversity of thinking around the table and to be able to say that we've got good democratic representation. But once you get above 5, you're starting to get into a large number of people to corral. So the purpose of the policy having a smaller group was that it was not having to have the entire council engaged in it. But that's not to say that 5 is the exact number, but we definitely thought smaller was wouldn't be good representation. But our advice would be not to make it too big.
Thank you. So, question.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. So would you be comfortable then if it was 6 to accommodate the desires of the council?
Point of clarification. Oh, it's up to you to make a decision on the number.
Sorry, I think I know what you're pointing
out. We're not talking about the amount of board members on the CCO.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Although the rationale applies the same.
I just had a question about the new policy to get the
remuneration.
Yeah, no, not the remuneration, the new policy, so which will set up this, instead of this one-time process that going forward, we'll always have a subcommittee. How long will that take?
So the new policy wouldn't necessarily require an ongoing subcommittee. Part of the process of revising the policy would be whether you have a standing committee that gets with the same membership that gets called to every time you need to appoint a new director, or whether you appoint a specific panel for each recruitment. The policy review we would anticipate would happen, would start in the next couple of months. It's not something we'd push out for ages, but we need, so the main decision is just not needing to do that before we appoint the board.
So following on from that, this committee that we create, panel, this will endure for 3 years for the WSCCO, or?
No, this would only be
just for this,
about appointing the establishment board.
Yeah, right. So if the director that we appoint leaves straight away, then what?
Then we would come to you with another recommendation about how to deal with that.
Right. So it's just.
So this is just for the establishment board, and we would anticipate that alongside going through the appointment of the establishment board, we would also start reviewing the policy so that by the time the board is on board, we at least have a draft that is being discussed with you about what the ongoing process would be to replace members for, because it's also for the airport. So the policy applies to both.
So just to be
clear that, I mean, that was the decision of this council not to have that. We used to have a governance subcommittee.
Yes.
Which did that, so it would require some direction from council to say that's what we want to have.
Yeah.
Um,
Right, it's quite confusing moving
yeah, so at the
forward.
moment, as you,
Yeah.
as you've experienced in the last recent times, you've had to go and empower individual panels each time. And while that might settle down, as Penny has rightly pointed out, there will be replacement directors for the airport and ultimately for the CCO and possibly other things along the way as well.
Yeah.
Councillor Brown.
Penny, one of the things we discussed in the workshop was the idea of appointing a chair and then the balance of the board in a slightly staggered process. It doesn't seem to be sort of captured in here. Is that, have you gone away from that thinking, or is that for our panel to work out, or where are we at with that thinking?
The direction that I took from the workshop was that we wanted specifically to understand the skills and capabilities of the chair as distinct from the skills and capabilities of the board as a whole, and that we would be specifically recruiting for a chair and for board members, not recruiting board members and then choosing one of them to be a chair, but not that we would stagger that because of the timing required. The timeframes required to go through the recruitment process to bring on a chair and then bring on the board members. That was the direction I thought we'd ended on, but there will be distinctly different processes for the chair versus the other board members, but in parallel.
And I think the concern I raised at the time was the scenario where you appoint a board who has no impact or overview of who's on the board, and then ends up being some sort of personality clash or whatever it might be. And I had thought we'd discuss slightly staggering it so that chair would be appointed first.
Mike can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but that is probably something that the appointment panel can determine in the process if they want to start their board chair recruitment process first. You don't have to lock that in this decision. This decision isn't specifying that, it's just specifying the size of the board. The panel will determine the skills matrix and the approach you take for recruitment.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, you sort of mentioned before that you appoint the directors for a fixed term and then you stagger them after them, but that seems to be setting ourselves up to fail because we're appointing everyone for the same fixed term. They're all coming up at the same time, and then you're appointing them again for another fixed term, but trying to stagger them.
So
I don't quite understand how what we want, that we don't want everyone to go at once, we don't want, we want them to be staggered. Shouldn't you actually set that up from the beginning rather than?
So the discussion in the workshop was that there would be an initial term where everyone would have the same term and one right of renewal. So you weren't doing full recruitment at the end of the 3 years. Essentially, there's a right of renewal at the end of the 3 years, and the second term is staggered. So it's the second term. Some people will be only there for a year or 6 months. Some will be 18 months. So it'll be a staggered, and that was based on I think the recruitment providers
for
here.
different periods, not just for you can renew for different periods, not just a fixed.
Yeah.
Yes, we have previously done that with the airport.
Yeah.
So it would be something you would expect the board to debate well before the end of the.
And apologies, I wasn't at the workshop on the 22nd, so if I missed that. The other thing is that, and once again, I wasn't at that workshop. So how does this align with the confirmation of the constitution by council? So how do we get both the approval of the constitution and the appointment of directors in order?
So we talked about the process to develop the constitution. Some of the elements that need to be in the constitution were discussed in the workshop, and then we've got a series of workshops scheduled to discuss the other elements, so that by the time we're officially appointing the directors, you will have agreed to the constitution, because you need.
Or at the same time.
Sorry?
You could theoretically do it at the same time, could you? Or,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, we need the constitution.
But the point being is we're developing, that's going to be before or at the same time. Yeah.
So these were these decisions are the first decisions that will feed into the constitution, because the constitution says what the size of the board is and some of these things. But these were the ones that we needed to start the board recruitment in parallel to developing the constitution.
I would probably add that it would be inherently preferable to have a constitution agreed before that, because obviously board members will want to know what constitution they're signing up to. So, you know, obviously we're on Penny and the team are on a very fast time track. So, but you know, our intention would be to get the constitution.
But there's a couple more touch points on the constitution and an approval.
Yes.
Process, yeah.
Yes.
The constitution with the size.
Yes. So the decision you make here about the size of the board will flow into the constitution. Yeah.
Councillor Barr.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. We've got the policy on the appointment of and remuneration of directors, the current one attached for reference. Item 4.2, and that talks about eligibility. It says councillors, says neither councillors nor council staff are included under the policy for appointment for a normal CCO, but for this water services CCO, my understanding, and this is what we need to clarify, is that councillors and council staff are not eligible to be directors on water services CCO.
Correct. That's one of the updates that needs to be made to the policy.
So just if the panel is looking, you know, to this document for some guidance, that particular clause doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Situation. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Glenn, question?
Firstly, I agree with what's in here, what we discussed at the workshop. I'm going to be just really pedantic, and it might be something that doesn't matter at all, but the paper says that we've complied with policy. And I'm just noting in here that the policy that we've got is quite specific about, you know, who does the appointments, and it has to be the governance subcommittee. Presumably it would fall back to the full council. We are allowed to breach policy, but it's a technical point where we've stated that there's no breaches of policy. Would it be, do you think we haven't breached policy at all, or would it be more appropriate to say we have and we need to, because I just want this to be clean from the start. It's a really pedantic point.
It says that the recommended option is consistent with the principles, as
Okay.
opposed to it complies with the letter of. So
Right.
when I included that, I thought that was inappropriate. So the policy has to be updated for some technical reasons, but the principles about the core principles around recruitment of directors.
Sorry, I didn't note that specific wording. That's
yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
So if you're all happy with that, then
Yeah,
I
I
can
was
leave
just
the wording,
purposes
otherwise.
of the
we can-
LGA, just to make
Yeah.
sure we haven't said we were complying with the policy.
So,
Sorry, I'm just confirming that the principles. There is a section in the policy entitled principles.
Yes, and the point I'm looking at is point 39 on page 79, where it just says the recommended option is consistent with the council's plans and policies.
Sorry.
It's-
And sorry, I was looking at 37, where we say the recommended option is consistent with the principles set out in the named policies. So that's a bit more specific. So maybe we can just update 39 to reflect the same wording.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, and I think you've set up why we need to be not consistent. Perfect, thank you.
so thank you for that. So now take some advice here, because we have 6 names who would like to form the panel. So for my reading, procedurally, we will need to amend item 3.
No, you won't at this point, because it hasn't been, the motion hasn't been put, so you can read that if you want to amend. And you'd amend 3 and 4.
Yeah.
But the different number, you can read that into this before you put the motion.
Put it as amended.
No,
Put it with those amendments.
with the amendments,
That's the
yeah,
motion.
yeah. Make it the motion.
But we will put the motion with that already.
If you wish to substitute 5 with a different number, I'm assuming it's 6, then if council are happy with that, we can change 3 and 4 respectively, and then that will become the motion. Yeah. Right.
We didn't agree on that, I'll show hands.
No, you don't even have to show hands on this one. No, we can just basically acknowledge that that's what you want.
Sorry, can I add something to this? Just in terms of the number, I would be only in terms of the size, when you asked in terms of the size, it's only marginally bigger, so.
Yeah.
But having an even number, just that might need some discussion amongst you, because if the group has to vote on something and you have an even number, that could be problematic.
just like full council.
I think I've still got a casting vote. Well,
Does
I'm
that-
trying to get rid of it.
Does that apply in a panel setting?
I don't think it does, but
No, I don't think it does.
it's just putting a recommendation.
Okay, I think if we're completely split down the line, then we've got some issues. On this.
So just before you move it, your worship, I suppose, assuming everyone's happy with this, are you happy to agree the names before you move it? That would make the whole thing very, very straightforward.
Yep,
That was the plan, yeah.
Okay, so the names, which will be in there, to be named are the Mayor, Councillor Bartlett, Councillor Brent, Councillor Tucker, Councillor Belt, and Councillor Gladden. And that gives us a mix of representation across the ward, so that.
Cool, that one might be into the.
Into the record. Yeah, so, somebody like to move the motion? Thank you, Councillor Bartlett, second, Councillor Bell, show of hands, any discussion? Okay, well, please, let's bring that to the vote and show of hands. That is carried, thank you. So item 4 on the agenda is the report and recommendations of the independent hearing panel for the urban intensification variation of the proposed district plan. Excuse me, we're going to matrix.
No.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
you passed it. It's passed.
Those, I mean, councillors sit back on your table, yeah, not a few, so.
No.
So, councillors who are conflicted, yes, you can either sit back in the stalls, you can push your chair back, just separate yourself from the table some fashion. You can say that if you like, you don't have to, you can say, but just push yourself back. Probably easier to stay there.
So thank you. Item 4, because the mayor has declared a conflict, I'll be leading this component. I'll be doing it from this seat rather than taking his seat. Apologies. But yeah, I suppose start with if there's anything that officers would like to add or speak to their report.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So look, today does mark a significant moment. For the district, it's a generational change that's been put forward here and worked on for quite some time. There's been an enormous amount of work put into this from staff and invaluable work from the community as well in terms of inputting into this process. The independent hearings panel also had to work very hard on balancing their approach in relation to taking community submissions on board and balancing with the information that was notified to make the decisions that have been put in the recommendation before you. It is urban intensification does make a real difference, moving to the future, and really just sets that foundation for the future growth and development of our community. So one of the key things to remember from the report today is we won't be able to make amendments through this, through decisions in this particular item, as that would have to reset back and put the process back through to the planning process for variation. So this really is a decision to accept or not to accept the recommendations. Happy to take any questions you might have. We'll take the report as read, and we have staff here to answer questions. We also have legal counsel online, and Sarah Scott from Simpson Grierson, who's been our legal counsel throughout this process. So happy to take any questions anybody may have.
Councillors, are there any questions?
Thank you to the staff and to the panel for the hard work on this. The planner and me was quite excited by it all. The one question kept coming to mind when I was reading some of it and then looking at the provisions that exist, the proposed plan anyway. Was there an opportunity taken through this? Or was this all done prior to the proposed environment bill and the planning bill? Because I can see that many of the rules now probably wouldn't be able to be applied. Did you look at that, or was that something for us to deal with in the future?
It's something for us to deal with in the future, but the proposed variation was promulgated a few years ago now. It's taken over a couple of years since notification to get through that process. So we weren't aware of the direction that the government was moving, and we did not have the planning bill that we do have before us. And I acknowledge that, yeah, the sands have shifted in terms of things like urban amenity. Yeah.
Thank you. And this is an ongoing struggle that we all have in our council, various departments, because there's some change happening, and it's happening very rapidly. And with changes of government, with continuous change, we have to get on with our processes, which do take time because of submissions and the work that has to be done. So unfortunately, there are cleanups that have to be made once policy changes through central government.
Thank you.
And sorry, I've got quite a few questions, so bear with me. The first one's quite an easy one. Amy and I have talked about it quickly, but can you just confirm the recession plans and the medium density, that there's actually been no change from the original? Because it was very confusing in the track changes, because it looked like there were changes, but actually the changes were reverting back to what it was originally.
Yes, that's correct. So the hearings panel and the recommended provisions that's appended to the report, that has shown the progression of those provisions through the notified and then the council experts' position on them through the hearing. And it's mentioned in the panel's report that they've done it that way.
Yeah.
So those track changes, yeah, I can see that there could be some confusion in that role. But that is correct. Those positions.
All right, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Arrowtown Design Guidelines, because there is definitely a little bit of concern that they have been removed from parts of the plan. So given the council and no submitter requested the removal of the Arrowtown Design Guidelines, do you think the panel had scope to remove these in their recommendation?
Yeah, well, we'll defer to Sarah Scott on this one. I certainly have a view, but there we are.
Thanks, and good afternoon, everyone. So, yes, there is under the case law that applies to what the hearings panel can do with the submissions before it. So, at its most basic level, a decision such as this one can make changes to the variation in response to what is reasonably and fairly raised in submissions, as well as consequential changes. They're also permissible as well. So there is a lot of case law around this. Specific drafting changes to a proposed plan don't actually need to be written into a submission, but the submission does need to, in substance, effectively raise an issue which allows particular changes to be made. So in this instance, with the Arrowtown Design Guidelines, the submissions that create the scope are general ones, but they are those that seek greater intensification and those that seek removal of barriers to development across the urban environment. So the reasons that the panel gives in its decision to do with the reference to the current guidelines in matters of discretion not being efficient or effective, they are because the Arrow Design Guideline is now not fully aligned with the changes being made to the residential zones in Arrowtown. So they effectively are, the recommendation is in response to those submissions asking for barriers to development to be removed and to enable greater intensification. There's also a secondary, I guess, allocation of scope in that the removal is consequential to some of the submissions specific to Arrowtown, and essentially that is around where changes have been made to density requirements. The current design guidelines in parts conflict with those standards and those density requirements, so they have been removed as a consequential change as well. So yes, I think the scope.
Okay, thank you. So next question on that. So say that it does allow the change. Yeah, and I guess in terms of the barriers for development, I guess there could be an argument that actually the design guidelines should have just been updated to allow for the more intensification rather than just removed.
So this is explained in the section 32 report and also through our evidence through the course of the hearing. Updating the design guidelines, they're material incorporated by reference in the district plan. The RMA prescribes a separate process for updating those. And in the section 32 report, it was explained that to update both the design guidelines and the provisions at the same time was going to be very difficult to align those processes because they're separate processes under the RMA. And that was the position that was taken in terms of the proposal that council notified, was that strategic approach to all of the design guidelines, not just the Araton.
Okay.
Yeah, my understanding also might be useful to understand that the potential changes to the system occurring through reform will not allow documents like the guidelines to be reference documents. So that may well have disappeared if those reform amendments take place.
But I guess we weren't considering reform when we're considering the rest of this, so then that's
absolutely
a moot point.
Just information.
Yeah, and I guess the point there is just because they haven't always worked perfectly doesn't mean they should have been thrown out. So I guess then this leads on to now we're in this existing Arrowtown character, which it's now been replaced with. How will staff determine what existing Arrowtown character is? Because I guess that's the big question that those who are big advocates of the Arrowtown design guidelines would be asking.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really good question. So the panel's recommendation is that there are still matters of discretion in those restricted discretionary activity provisions that enable consideration of Arrowtown's character, and they have chosen those words carefully. Those words would be replacing the current reference to the guidelines. But those will be the words that will be applied when restricted discretionary activity consent is triggered, and that those matters are considered.
So how do we go about determining what those matters are? Because I guess my next question is, what is the best way to work out what existing Arrowtown character is to refer to the Arrowtown design guidelines?
It may well be in part, we can't answer that question today, but that may well be a reference point when people are assessing developments to say this is a document that's been built up for the reasons it was built up, describing characters of different areas within Arrowtown. And that can be used again as an argument for a planner to say, here's the character. It can be communicated with various parties and developers to say, this is a document that holds the character and has been used in the past. We may have to date that. I don't know how that's going to work at the moment, so we don't have the answer to that exactly. But I think they're essentially a planner would have to say, how am I going to determine what the character is? And then, of course, you would have to be directed to something like the guidelines that exist.
No.
And they can still be in existence as a non-statutory document.
I mean, they still will be a statutory they're still part of the statutory document, because my understanding is they still apply to the historic zone and the town centre, right? So they're actually still part of the document. They just don't apply to the new suburban residential or medium density residential in Arrowtown. So there's quite a lot of concern from a number of people in Arrowtown, a number of groups that represent a lot of people in Arrowtown, that they have been taken out. Also, maybe I should just make a note here, as a general rule, the people that I have been speaking to are happy with the thing. Is just this one point, just to make that clear. So what would be the processes available to those that are concerned that this is weakening their position on protecting heritage and character, to get these either reinstated or to align Arrowtown's existing character to their design guidelines?
If the council were to adopt the recommendations and they become part of they're proposed to become part of the plan, then the option for those parties is to appeal the decision.
Okay, so there's no way that as a council we can recommend that existing Arrowtown character is defined by the Arrowtown design guidelines? Like, I'm talking about not part of I'm just talking about a direction from council as part of the resolution
I don't know that that can be the case unless it's part of a statutory policy that council are voting to put in place for the district. At the moment, I'm not aware of one that wouldn't have to go through that full planning process to be able to be added into the district plan as a requirement. To put it simply, I don't think it's a situation where we can make a resolution today that says the art and global characters defined by the guidelines for a planner acting on the RMA to take into consideration.
So what would that process look like when it started?
What I'm saying is I don't think that that's a process that can occur because that's an arbitrary process that isn't set down as a planning process to be voted on by councillors for a particular area. And that's just my understanding, but
I think you would then need to look to what the future holds, and this is the point I think that was made by Ali or Amy, or David, that in fact the new legislation will make that even harder to have as a basis to inform decision making.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think it's the point that we know that it's about to get harder, so why would we weaken our position now?
So because you would effectively, probably under the changes, be required to remove them anyway.
Councillor Bartlett. Oh, yes, just very quickly, back to one of the early questions. So this work's obviously been going on quite a long time, over a period of a few years. And can you just give it wasn't subject to the plan stop?
no, it was not. It was exempted from that due to the notification period and the hearings occurring. So
I thought that would be the answer. I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brett. I'm just trying to understand consequences here because in terms of a go, no go. So my first question is, if we decide to approve the recommendation, do you have any feeling on the level of reviews that might be lodged with the court around it? The number of disaffected parties?
we have 1,200 submissions, so
take a step.
Oh.
I'm sure. I mean, is it going to be a handful? Is it going to be 10 to 20?
I think it would depend on what you do. Naturally, if it were to be put forward as to go ahead with the intensification, those people who do not want intensification may fight that or may group together to fight that more likely. So you'd have less appeals, parties to an appeal or individual appeals. I think if you grant the intensification, if you did not grant it, all the parties who wanted something to occur that was going to increase value to their land would all be encouraged for that reason to be appealing. So you'd likely have more appeals.
Well, my follow-up question to that is if we decided to withdraw, what are the consequences of doing that vis-a-vis Section 75 of the RMA? What could the government do to us?
Yep.
Respond to that. So it's currently under plan stop. There's a pause on the requirement to implement the NPSUD. Unless there's national direction that comes into force after the 20th of August 2025 that has a timing requirement. The withdrawal option, though, wouldn't provide a return on the investment in variation to date. There's definitely there are definitely people out there who perhaps didn't submit who are definitely waiting for a decision on this in terms of the increased development entitlement that the UI enables.
I do note as well that intensification of existing urban environments is one of the priorities of our spatial plan. So that is a council policy in terms of, as well as looking at greenfields, that it's important that we try and get the best and most efficient use of our existing urban environments. And this, as well as that government NPSUD direction, is giving effect to that.
And through the chair, outside of the Section 75, there is a high potential for reputational damage to council in relation to following the process that we followed, all the work and money that had been put by both sides of the equation. And for those parties to feel all of that effort was wasted is obviously could be a concern in terms of reputational damage to QLDC.
Thank you. Sort of the flip side to councillor on my rights question, and that I'm very cognizant of the safeguards that may be being removed and the concerns of the community around those. The flip side to that would be, are there commercial developers who feel that this could not go far enough And what is the exposure to risks that we have here of them potentially raising an appeal against us for not going far enough?
I think we have the risk or the ability of appeals both ways essentially.
Mm.
That's something that council lives with most of our team.
To be
fair, it's not new in this. So yeah, we could expect appeals covering, say, the removal of the Arrowtown design guidelines, having them specifically named within the district plan, but we could also have appeals relating to different areas of our urban environment, and that different choices could have been made by the commissioners. And that's just a reality of planning under the first schedule. The first schedule allows for that under the RMA, and we expect it as part of our process.
Yeah, and through the chair, that's why it's such a significant report, as you'll know, in terms of the reading you've had to undertake to try and be as fulsome as possible and robust in relation to the decision to try and guard our ratepayers against appeals.
Thank you.
So I have a question too. So, I mean, it's interesting that, so they've in effect upzoned parts of three parks and things like that from medium density to high density, or there was a mix previously of and low density. In fact, I think there was some low density at the back there, but it's all to high density there now. Have you done and across the board, have you done sort of an assessment of the yield increase that could occur as a result of that, and the impact that would have on our infrastructure assumptions and the housing business capacity assessment and things like that?
Our plan is to run the model once a decision has been made today in terms of our dwelling capacity model, to basically change the parameters that were already in, which were the notified provisions of the variation, and they contributed to medium and long-term demand, essentially, or capacity of zone capacity. So yeah, we will be looking to change that and get that, but we haven't run the numbers. It's too new and it takes a little bit of time.
Just conscious that, you know, the Upper Cleaver conveyancing scheme, for instance, has made a whole bunch of assumptions, including the fact we're closing Riverbank Road as of today or something to install pipes to take this area's services to Project Pure. I mean, have we really understood the impacts on both our existing program, future programs around infrastructure consequences?
I do note, in terms of the hardware example, we had provided for quite a lot of development through that area, through both the spatial plan and through the district plan recently, and then that has changed around, I guess, in terms of the capacity for lots through this decision. We just have to run those numbers first, but I do.
I mean,
it will be right.
And I get that, but isn't that incumbent on resource management to understand the impacts on infrastructure? I mean, wouldn't that be usually part of a plan change process to understand whether it's practically feasible, or let alone whether it's affordable or deliverable? I mean, have we really understood that?
So as you can imagine, the LTP planning to put in place of conveyancing schemes happens well prior to those schemes actually coming into fruition. Changes like the NPS and the requirement of council to go through this has been in the very short term. So we've had to undertake that work. We haven't been able to revisit without a decision in place relating to intensification, and be it a recommendation to accept or not, to be able to change those previous LTP investments. And the issue of infrastructure,
more thinking about how it relates to the higher order policies in the district plan and the RMA directions around resources, whether it's feasible. How do they consider whether it's the infrastructure could cope with what they've decided to recommend? How did they make that decision without having any evidence on that?
Sorry, the decision in terms of the intensification of those areas, if there is servicing to existing through strategic planning of council to construct the infrastructure, or through private developers having agreements with council to develop infrastructure, then that land can be developed. The urban intensification
to a level.
But if we were to look at whole intensification zoning and say all of this in 100 years' time will be developed, that will not be developed unless infrastructure is provided through either strategic planning of council or developers installing that to be able to bring that to fruition.
Yeah.
This is setting a scope for people to consider what they may want to develop on the basis of, if recommended, council want people to intensify areas where it's generally more efficient to service and to provide areas and to reduce traffic by people being able to walk to different services. It's a principled approach to saying, this is how we want our development to occur. Here's what you can do, but you have to actually resolve the issues that are going to arise to make this happen, or the council here, or future council, are going to have to make decisions to open up those areas.
I suppose as I said, the point, I don't understand what the scale of this is now in terms of dwelling equivalents. I mean, I just don't understand, you know, is this a tripling or a quadrupling or something more regarding the, you know, that zone, for instance, and 3 parks? I don't know the scale of that, and I couldn't glean that from the report, so I don't know how. Anyway, I'll are there any other?
Make one comment regarding the difficulties of the provisions that have been included. So one of the new provisions that have been included across a number of zones is policy and matters of discretion in relation to the capacity of existing inland 3 waters infrastructure. And so those matters of discretion provide the opportunity for consideration of those things through the resource consent process.
Yeah, but it doesn't cover the, you know, is this the most efficient way to deliver intensification, because we don't know, we haven't assessed it. Anyway, I understand the point. Yeah.
One other thing that's noteworthy is that infrastructure capacity constraints aren't seen as a qualifying matter or a constraint in implementing policy 5 of the NPSUD. And this is a question that other councils doing their intensification very that they would discuss. So this council isn't alone. That there is clear direction in the NPSUD that we are required to implement policy 5, and that infrastructure capacity constraints that now may be present now aren't a constraint to intensification.
Okay, and I mean, I touched on it with Dave earlier that there's some interesting language here. It's that there's some policies that have been changed to the word encourage, for instance, rather than, you know, allow or whatever, you know, that they're really empowering terminology under the RMA's encourage or to ensure, or, you know, and combined with the fairly broad use of restricted discretionary status, which equally in practice has been quite empowering. I mean, I can't think of an example where a restricted discretionary activity has been declined. I could be wrong, but I can't think of one. I suppose does that cause some problems from a planning perspective, that broad use of the restricted discretionary?
Yes, absolutely.
I can talk to that. So one example is the use of encourage in a policy for one of the town centre, which is on the restricted discretionary band building heights. So these are buildings between 16.5 metres and 20 metres in parts of the town centre. That restricted discretionary activity band has specific, and this is discussed quite a lot during the hearing, those matters of discretion focus on building dominance, which was one of the issues that was really highlighted by submitters. The word encourage in that particular policy is encourage X when you get Y. So it's not just encouraged across the board. There's some parameters around that encouragement.
Which once again comes on you guys to administer that in a way that's which is tough, and I get that.
But that also gives assistance to a planner applying that restricted discretionary consent to and then give some guidance in terms of the things to be thinking about in the front of that consent. And that particular scenario works in concert with a new rule that we're including for one of the town centres, which is the upper floor building setback rule. And they actually work together in terms of decreasing the dominance. So in that example, the word, in my view, the use of the word encourage is appropriate because you're encouraging in that instance.
Thank you. Well, very interesting. The reflecting on what Councillor Brett was asking and the status of this and in particular Councillor White's concerns for the Arrowtown community. And I'm thinking about those in either downtown or in the vicinity of downtown Wanaka and here. If we adopt this, just looks like a likely path, and there are appeals from some of those who feel aggrieved or significantly affected, what position do we have to take in that appeal process? Are we entirely objective, or do we have to defend our plan against residents who might want to appeal?
Yeah, we can certainly answer, but I think Sarah does this as her bread and butter, so probably best for Sarah to answer that one for you.
Sure. So the council, so you essentially will make resolutions about the way that any appeals are addressed. So the standard process in appeals like this is they get grouped into topics, and so that they go in the first instance to court-assisted mediation. So an Environment Court Commissioner gets the people in the room and tries to help resolve it. In terms of the council moving away from the decisions version, the ability for those representing the council in the room, and one person will hold authority that you've given, it's actually the, is it the Smart Growth Committee? Is that what it's called now? That committee will give the delegations to the council team in terms of any changes that can be made. And we will come to that committee with a report and advice to you on what we think should be done in response to that particular or any particular appeals. There are some, in terms of our experience, where sometimes the appeal point makes a lot of sense and it's quite straightforward to mediate. There are, at the other end of the spectrum, sometimes it's almost best just to go straight to the Environment Court because we know we're not going to get a mediated outcome. So that is just where I guess the team advising you comes in and helps with the strategy on what happens.
Thank you. Excellent. So very well answered. My other question then is about status as well, and it goes back to what I was reflecting on earlier, that with the local component of a new regional spatial plan, what is the status of these plans and their detail, which appears to be not consistent with the intent, at least, of the planning and environment bills? How much of this will carry on and have an effect in the future before the new new legislation fully is effective?
That's a pretty loaded question, just in terms of all the different types of legislation that need to come in, all the different plans and dates through 26, 27 up to 29.
Right.
In relation to when these things take effect, we've got to go through a process of relooking at all the land in the district. And again, this is on the basis of the reforms actually going through as in their current form. We've got to look at all the zones that are there, overlay new standardized zones that have been discussed in relation to that. Look at whether or not, it's likely that the standardized zones will be aimed at things like the things in our intensification recommendations, because that's what the government is trying to achieve, is intensification around these areas. But we'll have to go through that whole process and retrofit, if you like, to some extent, what our plan is into the new planning framework. And that should be done within 3 to 4 years.
So this will
and ultimately to actually be fully complete and not and live.
So through the chair, I think one of the things is I suppose recognising the direction of the government and the legislation. So it will be significantly shifting some things. We have to have a joint regional planning statement within 15 months, I think, or 18 months of the legislation that will set the high direction. And the other point too, when we talked to Councillor White's commentary around design guides, with it, I think these are open season for regulatory relief provisions, because they'll be seen as being a impulse against reasonable use. So I think there's a lot of, these will have a life, but the life will be very limited in some respects.
Yeah, and there are many questions that we're still asking about things like regulatory relief and our intensification rules versus new zones and reduce the amount of development capacity, all of these different things that we're being told we need to do, but also impacts in terms of regulatory.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right,
Well, I'm happy to move with the questions that run out.
okay, so Councillor Tucker has moved the motion. We have a seconder. Councillor Barton is second. Any discussion? Yeah.
You
go last.
No, he can go
I
first.
can go first then. Got me twice. I'm gonna sit in it. I'm gonna change the tone a little bit because it's a bit weird. I'm actually really excited about this in a lot of ways. I mean, part of the nuance that's really hard is that the community who are advocating for this now are advocating from people who already own houses and are looking at their, neighbours and boundary lines and sight lines. The community this will help provide are people who don't have houses. And this will provide more choice and options. We talk about infrastructure. The more dense we have, the less infrastructure we need to provide. We talk about the appeals. When have we not had a plan that's not had any appeals? Design guidelines, again, the most restrictive thing I've found in development is developer covenants, far less than anything else. So, I mean, they still play a huge role to play in a lot of this. But I think, in general, this was a really contentious issue. There was a lot of thoughts to canvas and reading through it and how the decisions that came to it. I was just quite relieved and grateful of the amount of work and I think the sincerity that both staff and the panel took to it, because I think we've somehow weaved the thin line of everybody being happy enough, which I think is pretty. But yeah, I mean, from my perspective, obviously, I want to grow in the right way. We live in the district that has the least affordable housing in the country that has the least affordable housing to income ratio in the OECD. We are a problem in so many ways, and part of the answer is more variety and having different opportunities for different typologies. And doing the work now with that focus on the future communities, I think is really prudent, and I think it's come to a really considered place that takes into account the nuance of the area. So that's why I'm happy to support.
Councillor Wall.
Thank you. I just want to thank the three commissioners on the panel because there was a substantial amount of work, but not only that, it was such a controversial panel to be on in terms of 1,200 submissions, 80 something speakers at hearings across Queenstown, Wanaka and Arrowtown. And there was a lot of reading to do, I suspect. I actually dodged a bullet because Councillor Lyle Cox took my place as one of the commissioners on the panel. And I'm very grateful to him for doing so. And I do just want to clarify for the public who probably were quite frustrated by Queenstown Lakes District Council and the council in general, believing that this is our policy and our drive to intensify urban areas. This is national policy, and we don't drive intensification anymore. This is coming from a national directive. All we can do really is manage the narrow bandwidth, I guess, of how the intensification happens to us. So I just wanted to clarify that for anyone who's frustrated by councils around the country believing that this policy is coming from us. It certainly is not, and certainly we'll probably do it differently. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been a very long process for a lot of people. It actually started on my day one as a councillor. This actually is one of the first things I ever voted on. And it has taught me a lot. I want to take a moment to thank the huge number of people, not only of Arrowtown, but across the district, who took the time to contribute so meaningfully to this process, which I do believe has brought us to a point where the recommendation reflects many community concerns. I did sit in on many days of the hearings in Arrowtown, and my only point is that I do believe the removal of the Arrowtown design guidelines does not reflect the views of most of the submitters. A bit of background, the Arrowtown design guidelines are not a recent or lightly prepared document. They are a product of decades of community input and two full and formal consultation processes. First adopted in 2006 following extensive community engagement, the guidelines were comprehensively reviewed and consulted on again in the 2016 as part of the district plan review led by QLDC. The 2016 review was undertaken specifically to respond to the introduction of the medium and low density residential zoning in Arrowtown and to provide clear guidance to manage the design effects of increased density while maintaining and enhancing Arrowtown's unique character. The recommended building controls now retain the same height limits that were consulted on in 2016. Those height provisions were expressly considered alongside the Arrowtown design guidelines and relied upon to demonstrate how increased density could occur without eroding Arrowtown's character. In that context, the 2016 guidelines represent the authoritative consulted framework for understanding, protecting and enhancing Arrowtown's character, retaining the heights while removing the guidelines that were developed and consulted on to support them breaks that relationship and undermines the basis on which the community engagement was undertaken. We are in a period of transition from the current RMA to a new Planning Act. This new Planning Act may see changes further erode the character protections in Arrowtown. Retaining reference to the Arrowtown design guidelines and the new suburban residential and the medium density residential in Arrowtown might potentially strengthen character reasons under the replacement planning regime. While there may not have been submissions to seek greater intensification, there may have been submissions to seek greater intensification or barriers for development, not one of those submissions requested or suggested that the guidelines be removed. So I don't believe that there was scope for the commissioners, but here we are. So just because they weren't working perfectly doesn't mean they should be thrown out. The Friends of Arrowtown, which is a group that was strongly involved in this, have expressed their disappointment to the recommendation to the current requirement about having them removed for those particular zones. It is my understanding, and it was confirmed today, that the best way forward for them should be, and it is likely that they will appeal this part of the recommendation.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, as I said earlier, this is a huge piece of work, and yeah, the panel did a marvellous job. I read many of the submissions that came from mostly residents of the district, which was great, or people with an interest in it. And I don't think it's going to please everyone, but the approach taken and the decisions made, other than, and I entirely empathise with the design guide issue for Arrowtown, is that this is significantly less of an imposition on our communities and our, I think the landscape of our district than would have been the case if those really well put, well articulated submissions from people involved and the consideration of those by staff and the panel would have been quite different. So the outcome in that regard is better than it could have been. I think this marks, to some extent, Queensland Lakes District Council growing up and not so much growing out. So, you know, we're maturing in a way contrary to many of the fast track applications that are being thrown at us through similar central government initiatives, which are about having a hugely extensive urban environment that is drastically undermining why Queenstown Lakes is what it is, the jewel in the crown for the national economy. So many of those initiatives, I think, are undermining what the government actually intends. This doesn't. It draws back from that somewhat. It's enabled us to have some control over that. It's, if you like, smart growth. Not the smartest growth, but it's smarter than we would have had before. So I think we have to agree the recommendations. Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you for all the work and thank you for replying to emails and my concerns. Yeah, there's a lot of information there, but it did put my mind at ease. And I think, I think we will have a job on our hands getting some of the community, you know, their concerns at ease, but I do think most of the recommendations are actually like suitable and will be fine for the community. And like you say, Cody, I think for a lot of the community that need homes, it's actually really great. I do just
yeah, like you were saying, councillor Wong, maybe to reiterate that some of the community members won't be happy with the QLDC and won't be happy, especially the Wanaka town with the height and levels changing. But I think that a lot of the recommendations, if we can, that there's the different planes and the step back, we just have to make sure that we can explain that to them. I think they have done a really good job there. It's a shame that we can't influence any more of the outcome, and that I'm just voting, I'm just like taking a vote, not really making a vote, but and again, want to reiterate that that's the law and that's what us as councillors have to do.
I'll be second to last.
Well, I'll comment first, thank you. Yeah, look, I think the commissioners have gone a long way to reducing some of the flashpoints here, and I think the reduction of heights in most of the residential zones and in Arrowtown and other places have gone a long way to taking the fire out of this. But there are parts of this I'm still uncomfortable with, and it's been highlighted that it's a tricky position for us as councillors, and that we don't get to choose the provisions they're put on the table, and we're asked to accept a recommendation. So, we haven't heard the evidence, we haven't heard the submissions, but we do have our own views about which bits we like and don't like. And there's parts of this I really don't like, but I don't get that luxury. Now, the bit that I really struggle with is that, over the last 20 years or so, resource management to me has moved away from managing resources to we're now making a decision on an unknown density over an unknown time frame, an unknown cost and unknown implications around infrastructure. And that is a problem, and that's something we'll have to grapple with moving forward. It's been highlighted that this is effectively an interim decision. We are in the process of major reform. I've seen height limits in the town centre in Wanaka that have been in place for over 20 years and there's 3 buildings that come anywhere near the current limits. We have the entire Three Parks area, for instance, that has a whole range of zonings that are nowhere near utilised to the extent that they're utilised. So I take some comfort from this isn't going to result in a massive change overnight. It will provide opportunity for some change in housing. It's not going to completely undermine the residential areas that we have because we've tacked the heights down and we're in a state of flux and a state of change. But I seriously think we need to get our head around, knowing where we're headed in terms of infrastructure and cost and time. I mean, the high density zone, if I'm correct, doesn't actually, how do you plan infrastructure for the high density zone when you have no idea what density is going to result from it and what scale of land use? It is such a broad, empowering zone that we can't plan for that anymore, and it puts us in a very difficult place. I'll leave it there and leave it up to the movers to. Did you get it?
Just a question and a comment. As much as I choke, I believe that it would be very bad for us not to vote, not to take the recommendation and vote in favor of this. And I feel the heavy hand of central government on this. And I think it's what Mel said, which is that we should identify this is not a policy. And I know that the safety valve for someone who is utterly opposed to this on a very small house by house basis is the Environment Court. But with reference to what Clement said, if we vote in favor of this, and nevertheless we were opposed as a council or as an entity to something like Three Parks, which does not have the infrastructure, individuals don't challenge the lack of infrastructure in the Environment Board. Is there a method? Is there a mechanism to challenge that lack of infrastructure and the designation of that as a high density area in the Environment Board?
I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
no questions, no questions.
Yeah,
No,
sorry.
Sorry, I
no,
can't.
My next question.
no questions.
We're past the question, please, sorry.
No questions.
Well, we're
Yeah.
past the question, we have a
Oh, I'm
question.
sorry.
Yes,
Have that discussion outside of the.
Yeah. It's the challenge that we face, that how to.
Rhetorical question.
Firstly, I just want to acknowledge all the work that's gone into this over a long period of time, firstly from the council staff. From all the people that submitted and spoke at the hearings, from the experts that were called on, and from the panel themselves to go through all of the evidence and submissions and to make a decision on. So there's a lot of work going on there. Personally, I mean, I agree with many of the sentiments expressed around the potential negative effects and also the disadvantages that are listed in the report. But it's our responsibility and role to oversee this organisation, carry out its obligations to implement government policy in a way that seeks to have the least negative effect on our communities. And I think through this long process, I think that's where we've ended up, or as good as it's going to get.
Well said. I think we can keep on.
Okay, all right, well, I'm going to put it to the vote. Please vote and hold your hands up. All those in favour?
Right.
Of those voting, it's unanimous, and move the motion, and the motion is moved. And we'll bring the others back to the table. Thank you.
You want a 10-minute break?
Thank you, councillors, and just a special thanks to staff. There's a lot of late nights and sweat and blood tears into this. So thanks very much to all the staff and to Sarah for assistance as well. There's been a lot of people involved. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we adjourn. Sorry.
Thank you. I know.
It will be the meeting, just confirm we've got the live stream and the recording happening. Thank you very much. And item 5 on the agenda is the 6-monthly progress update on the climate and biodiversity plan. And so we'll be receiving a report noting that, but please present.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Kia ora koutou, councillors. Look, the agenda item before you is stated as the first 6-monthly progress report for the latest climate biodiversity plan. And it covers the delivery period from July last year through to December. The report responds directly to the resolution last year regarding council staff that are providing these regular 6-monthly update reports to full council. It's the first formal checkpoint, I guess, for the new plan. At a headline level, the program is progressing well. There's over 50 actions in the plan, with 48 in progress and 2 scheduled to commence in the coming year. The report utilises a new RAG status, which is similar from other reporting that you will receive, and that's to support governance review. The amber-rated actions reflect kind of capacity, timing and sequencing pressures that we are seeing, rather than any fundamental delivery issues. Importantly, all actions remain within the delivery timeframes that are stated in the plan, and as well as within the budgets that are approved by council. The report also highlights some important recent progress that's been made in the space of the organisation of greenhouse gas emissions reporting, climate scenario analysis, and the mahi that is underway with regards to the electrification actions across the district. The recommendation today is for this report to be noted. Happy to take the report as read and open the floor for questions.
Yep. It's a slightly facetious one, but the 2.3 in the protecting Indigenous biodiversity through planning policies got it on track where, you know, at a high level, you would say it's in crisis. Which one is it? I know it's not your fault.
Well stated, through the chair. Yes, so very much the action plan relates to those actions. I guess that's within our agency.
Within the scope of our control.
Correct. So we thank the planning policy team in particular for the work they're doing in that space. A lot of connection with the regional council as well, but quite rightly stated, Councillor Smith, there is a big challenge.
And look, I suppose it's pointing out that I've often taken aim at these traffic light systems of which I don't think always demonstrate the complexity of what's going on. And that's an example. I use that as a deliberate example because I think that the narrative in there probably should reflect that there's a lot of changing in the broader world outside of our control, and a way to sort of renew that to more meaningful criteria.
Hi, I really like the report. It's great, thank you. I just have a few questions slash comments under outcome 5. Our built environment is resilient with low environmental impact. 5.4, there's promoting a better building standard. And this is similar to like 5.8, which is supporting community-led water initiatives. I live in Wanaka, so I'm very happy that it's quite Wanaka-centric, but it does kind of concern me that a lot of the people mentioned on that side of the hill. Is it known that it's going to be replicated, or are they working on behalf, or how do we see that playing out?
Through the chair, quite rightly pointed out that many of our actions relate to working partnerships, and so we do want to recognise the great work of the WOW team, particularly in the Better Building Working Group space. So that's an initiative that has been launched now in Clutha. It does have individuals and stakeholders from across this site as well.
Yeah.
But taking the influence of that particular group and seeing how we can, I guess, scale it up across the district, certainly that's part of the intent. The building space is quite challenging with regards to acceptable standards that are set through the building code and the rest of it. So we have actively campaigned, I guess, and endorsed improvements to the building code. So what we are seeing in this space is that the opportunity to support homeowners and developers with choosing and selecting better design options that are appropriate to, I guess, this environment, that represent lower emissions and better home efficiency, for example. So there's quite a bit of work in terms of educational space.
Yeah.
And what we are finding that's the messaging in that is very well delivered through the groups that we work with, and in partnership too with some of the work that we put through our building team here.
Yeah.
Similar in the water space as well. Yeah, there's some very good initiatives happening at a community level.
Cool, thank you. I have another question on the 5.7, strengthening stormwater resilience and water usage. How's that going to, when we move to a water services CCO, how do you see that working? Are you guys still gonna cover that, or?
Well, one thing I will say that this is a plan for the organisation, and so there is some significant work happening in the stormwater space. But yes, it will be transferred again, the responsibility once the new water entity is established as part of the decisions that have gone through. So existing investment in that space, I expect to continue. What we are looking at is how we can ensure that the best design options and the best choices are being made. One area is around nature-based solutions, understanding how some of those best practices. So yes, I guess the future of the organisation is still being worked through in terms of where ultimately how that transition will occur. But the responsibilities that then fall on the CCO, I expect will follow on in the similar vein to what we're seeing at the moment.
Hopefully.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It's still our organisation though.
Still your organisation, correct. Yes.
Great work. Follows on from the workshop earlier. Thank you. I think it reiterated to me, reading this, the question I put then, and so it can be a question now. Have you, perhaps after that workshop, thought any more about, and or perhaps could you, that looking at this, the time, and I think perhaps what the Deputy Mayor was talking about there are dates, but their range of dates, essentially from the start of the plan to the end of it, for things to happen. For us to have oversight of whether things are actually being achieved or not, and what's being achieved, and whether things are happening or not that we could help with. Could there be more specificity in here about what it is that's being done, not just what the objectives are, but the activities? I think it would be helpful. And have you thought any more about, again, reiterated for me, that this is a 3-year document. We're looking at LTP. Every other document we have is 10 years. Do you think that some of these things would be more meaningfully be achieved if they were actually stepped out over 10 years rather than crowded into 3?
Through the chair, yes, the feedback received on Monday was reviewed, and the opportunities associated with more granular, I guess, updates on the program are certainly there. This is the first progress report. Yes. I do note it's 18 pages of reading. The longer version we did have, including details around some of the more operational kind of actions. So it is finding that balance. Certainly the work we are undertaking relates to a 3-yearly kind of plan to drive some urgency, but it feeds into and connects very strongly with spatial plan, LTP, 30-year infrastructure strategy as an example. The work that's happening to look at 30-year infrastructure strategies, like the incorporation of some climate considerations around resilience to climate events and shock events, as well as the low impact on the environment. These are all part of that integrated kind of planning system to which the CBP plays an important role. So it is just getting that balance right. We don't want to create separate CBPs that are parallel to the other work programs. This is a driver and a bit of a navigation system towards where some of those priorities need to be. So certainly that's as we look at that planning system that the council operates with, so understanding clearly how the CBP supports that, that's part of that, that process that we are maturing into.
I think just following up on Councillor King's observation in terms of the water and what we might invest or what our council organisation might invest. I guess the existential question is how do we put a monetary value on, if we look at environmental outcomes, when we'll have an organisation that is having to demonstrate most cost-effective going forward. Because if we can't quantify it, how can those investment decisions be taken into account? And that's the challenge. I'm not expecting an answer now, but it is just that observation. I mean, maybe resilience, the 1 in 1,000, whatever, that would be a cost-benefit analysis that justifies the investment. But there'll be other things that aren't that straightforward. And that is the challenge. If this is the plan for the whole of the organisation, how are we able to get those across into that sort of decision making plan? So, just to know, really. Try that one out on the table. Any other questions?
Yeah, I'd love to sit down with you guys for like 3 hours and talk through the whole thing. So I don't really know where I'm going to start. But first question is, how are we going on tracking the district's emissions?
Yes, like, would you like to respond to that, Kirsty?
Yes, we've been working with other officers in Otago through the OCOG, Otago Climate Officers Group. So we are looking at a tool that's been rolled out nationally across other regions. At this stage, we're still in the investigation stage.
Okay.
Because some districts in our region are doing it quite well already. Yeah. So still in the investigation.
That's really good to hear.
Can I just supplement to that? This is another area of partnership with the regional council. So the regional council did, I guess, commit to regional level districts emissions reporting. We've had 2 reports on that. The next step in that program has been about figuring out how do we start to leverage a more national approach, which is where many councils around the country are starting to say, look, it does not make sense for individual areas to be looking. It's also a little bit arbitrary when we do kind of look at those territorial boundaries. So providing common tool sets in this space that supplement with national level data sets, that seems to be very much the more practical approach.
Yeah, that's great. It'll be really good to see how we're tracking. LPG, quick question. Have we decided on a solution yet? And it's not your department, I know, but we can't go anywhere unless the solution's been landed on.
Yes, yeah. So the program with regards to the aquatics LPG conversion, so that is underway. The nominations are in play at the moment with selection to be announced very soon.
Okay, that's good to know. So we're getting somewhere. Now, just on the embedding action 2.2, the embedding climate and diversity into council decision making, you're saying, well, it's really busy, everyone's stretched, therefore we can't embed. But the thing is, we're busy doing things that we should be embedding into, which is frustrating because once it's done, and it's hard to wind it back. So how do we get busy people, and do you have any ideas, to think of this as something that just has to be done as we're going, because it's the most efficient way to do it is embedding. Now, when things are being developed, really busy, LTP, Border Services, CCO. You might want to comment on that, but also how do you help us embed, because we have options. And so is there something structural that you can foresee whereby, you know, when we have options like the development of the water CCO, your team could provide, or the climate reference group, if it's tasked with it, could provide some sort of advice to us about how we could embed through our decision making. Doesn't have to go through the offices. There might be any comments.
No, absolutely. Look, that action in particular relates to a change management process, and you know, there is maturity development that has been happening within this organisation for quite some period of time. What we are seeing is many of these elements that we work with, many of the areas, they are becoming standard part of professional practice. You know, all engineers need to be looking at climate projections and understanding the impacts on those. Certain areas such as the new legislation, the National Policy Statement on Natural Hazards requires understanding of climate projections. Increasingly, this is not, you know, separate kind of activity from day jobs. This is becoming a functional part of what professional officers need to do.
I'm just responding to the amber.
Yes, yeah. So the training, I guess, what it relates to is the opportunity for training and for kind of professional development in this space. We are seeing some areas of extremely good practice with regards to project outcomes, where some of those considerations have been picked up and championed through, whereas that's not fully I guess, the systematic approach across everything at the moment. So when we talk about embedding, it largely relates into tools and frameworks that then become part of standard practice. And so looking at those frameworks and understanding what this early climate impact assessments, for example, look like in the project management space, as well as looking at other kind of areas where decision making occurs and ensuring that a variety of considerations are part of it. So so in that organisational development space, this is a domain of expertise that we are kind of trying to champion.
I just wonder, instead of in our reports when they come to us, sorry, this is necessary directly, but the reports when they come to us have a section, they go, you know, often the climate biodiversity plan will be mentioned in the list of things that have council policies that have been considered. but we don't understand how, they never reference particular actions that are within the scope of that, decision that's to be made. I just think maybe we could take a bit further, I guess it would be my
There's an opportunity there, yes.
comment. But that's for us to figure out, because that's governance and stuff.
If I may just add
Yeah,
to
go
that
for
point, we had a workshop on this on Monday. I followed up with Leslie. She's gotten connection around the CCO group, and they're actually meeting with their infrastructure expert, the climate reference group infrastructure expert. So that stuff is happening with post that workshop, because we all sort of had that consensus in building those soft skills, just to reinforce that there is an asset and we can do it in the
Yeah, and I will, sorry, we're at shorter time, so I'll do my last one, which is maybe predictable action 1.5 agrochemical reduction, which has been kind of a dream of mine and Esther's over the last term and before that even, and I guess it's sitting there and I think it says it's on track. So I guess I'm wondering, and I've asked this of other tracking that we've got in quarterly reporting, if it stays where it is it still, for years, how does it stay green? And do you think we could measure colour status against some sort of time frame, so that maybe it's been amber for 3 years, or it's been green for 3 years, but we still haven't drafted the scope, because it says draft scope will be developed, and I've had conversations with officers over the years, and we haven't progressed it, but it's green.
Yeah.
It's long-winded.
I know the particular interest in this action. It is a carryover from the past plan. We are building certainly knowledge and understanding in this space. There's been significant work around understanding the inventory of our agrochemicals. It's not too dissimilar to emissions. Building that reporting, understanding what the level of usage is, and then starting to understand where there's opportunities for reduction lie. We have picked up on many examples around the country with regards to making the right moves in this space. It can be with best intentions. We have seen other councils retract back from some of their steps. So understanding where those opportunities lie and working cross-functionally. We know for example, the Parks and Recreation team, there's an assumption they use the most. They certainly do not. It's in the roading space where much of that occurs. And as we're looking at the technical specifications for new contracts, working that through, because that's an opportunity.
Well, we did do that, and the assumption was that the new contractor was going to have the capability to test out things like low mow and stuff, which have been on the cards as a tester for years, and we've got enthusiastic stuff, and yet nothing moves. And I guess my point was not to be picky about that particular one, although it is my favourite.
Yes, yeah.
How do we make the tracking meaningful? Because if that's green,
and
that was all really. So I just, how do we make it? Let us know how long things have been progressing for, and how much we've achieved over what time frame would be good to know.
Yeah. And look, some of that information is available at the project level. Yes, as we look at how we provide overall kind of progress updates to this council in terms of your governance role over the broad program, as well as looking at the steering for the individual kind of projects that are underway.
Jumping in, what I would say is there'll be, now that we have environment as a specific topic on one of our standing committees.
Yes.
I think that that reporting back can probably be more frequent than a 6 monthly. And I think the committee will probably sort of pick up on some of these, what's drilling down into some of that reporting. I think there's a really good opportunity for that.
Understand prioritisation.
Yeah, yes, and through the chair, as stated on Monday, there is an opportunity to look at, I guess, how we provide that regular reporting into the appropriate council structures.
Without taking up all your time on reporting.
Well, that's part of it.
Thank you, you did a great job.
We don't know, but we know.
Yep. Seconds. Okay, any discussion? Perfect, we'll just go straight to a vote. Those in favour, please show.
Aye.
Those against? Thank you.
Thank you.
There you go.
Look forward to coming to our committee.
Looking forward to that. You'll see where the next one.
Yeah, another name.
So we're now going to move to item 6, Chief Executive's report. And Mike, I have to say you've left the best to the last after it's long and
Well, yeah,
multifaceted report.
I didn't want you to forgive me too soon.
We'll remember this afternoon fondly. This is an emptying the bottom drawer sort of chief executive report.
I don't know if there's anything that's been lying there festering, but we'll hopefully move through it fairly quickly. And you'll see the background that's in the paper. So the first one is simply an amendment basically around our protected disclosures policy. And really the decision that we've taken to move from making the chair of the Audit and Risk Committee the repository or the first point of contact for protected disclosures to using an independent provider. And look, that is consistent with where things are tracking as best practice. So it's a very, very simple change. I think it's a very cost-effective change for us, and hopefully, you know, we can never be too short. We won't have that, but if it's needed, it's needed, and that's there. The second one, without wanting to open up an entire discussion on freedom camping, because that's not the purpose of this report. This report is simply to make minor amendments to a couple of the sites where the mapping and the description of those areas has been sort of not completely accurate. I think we signalled, Marie's just walked in the room, we did signal that these sorts of changes would possibly be coming as we move through. So again, hopefully they are anticipated. They are part of correcting and ensuring that part of the bylaw is as accurate as we can make it. Moving through to minor amendments to resource management delegations, attachment B. We sort of canvassed that earlier this afternoon, where the RMA in particular is one where there are very strong limits about, or very strong processes around sub-delegations and delegations. So again, the team to keep an accurate eye on that. And it's about making sure, in this instance, largely that the delegations reflect the names and the status of the people that we're delegating. So there's nothing in this these reports that are trying to shift the weight of authority. It's about correcting and making sure that we're consistent with the way we intend to handle that. 6 and 7 deal with the Otago Local Authorities Triennial Agreement. It's a requirement under the Local Government Act. It's a requirement that each council endorses that. For those of you who've been councillors before, you'll note that this is a much more stripped down version of the previous one. And in many respects, you know, there's the work program of the triennial of the group, the councillors, is actually fundamentally being shaped by different agendas, and particularly the simplifying local government process. That's going to predominantly, I think, absorb the energies of the councils across Otago for the next little while. Just as 3 years ago, you know, the previous Three Waters program absorbed the energies of the councils. Having said that, those things are consistent with Section 17A of the Local Government Act, which doesn't change, which is also a provision for councils to consider basically different and more efficient ways of delivering services, including collaboration and the delegation of services from one council to another.
Thank you. There's a couple of things I'd like to ask questions about. Should we wait for Michael to finish, or could we move it on?
I think if we run through the others and we can just come back.
That'd be great. Happy to do that.
Thank you.
So you'll see the amended governance statement, and there's an amended version was added to the agenda. That's really adopting the governance statement that basically corrects and updates everything to reflect the new council. You've got a recommendation to appoint councillors Bartlett, Brent, Wong and Mitchell as a reserve on the bench. Reserve to form a panel to hear the Kawerau Riverside Management Reserve Plan, Reserve Management Plan. And then beyond that, 10, 11, 12, 13 through to 16 all basically refer to recommendations from the Wanaka Upper Community Board to agree things that they have considered, and we have staff here who have been part of that. And then basically, the project prioritisation in the annual plan. So this is prioritising in that part of the annual plan the following activities. So Roy's Bay Jetty, Wanaka Lakefront, the artificial turf, active travel and art and facilities. So this has come also from the Wanaka Community Board. And then the final one is a recommendation from the board that any allocation of the Wanaka Asset Sale Reserve by Council should be agreed to in conjunction with the Wanaka Upper Community Board. The Council has the power to make that decision. So conjunction doesn't mean that there are equal partners in the making of that decision, but it's a signal that the board wants to be included and part of those decisions. So the decision making does continue to rest with the council. Right, and happy to go back and cover anything off.
Questions on any specific topic areas?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. I've got two, one about item 5 and one about item 6, but potentially a suggestion for item 6. Well, item 5, we saw in the media, I think this week, a report on Dunedin City Council considering how they might approach the local government simplification. And already we see Dunedin City Council's positioning to secure assets that are currently held by LRC that would not be in our favour. Is it intended that there be a conversation similarly here for us to think about what's our approach going to be that the mayor will then have to put?
So, I mean, I read that report and probably felt, with all due respect to Dunedin City, that they were sort of preempting the discussion way too early. But I think ultimately, that to me forms part of the work of the CTB. So
I think that was probably more the question, isn't it? Central Otago District Council chose their preferred voting model, which was one vote per council as opposed to population based, which would inform the CTB. So I think that.
So bearing in mind that the CTB hasn't actually been informed as we're talking, but that would certainly be as we move through towards that. Yes, we would, in the same way we had that initial dialogue with you a couple of weeks ago, we would continue to dialogue those aspects as they.
The irony of it was, of course, is that our percentage of the population is almost exactly 20%, which happens to be 1 in 5. Exactly the same voting power as a single vote. So,
and I think the key one of the key things is we're not limited to those models.
No,
and I think we did actually discuss that in the workshop about other models and ways of valuing things, because we know, for example, that we make a disproportionate contribution to the RC through the capital value of the district in terms of rating purposes. So I think leaping to some simplistic outcomes like those models, I think is something that we would expect, and I think this council would want its representative on the CTB to actually seek a more comprehensive discussion on some of those topics than perhaps the ODTs reflected.
Sure. But equally, I'm not sure that the Act gives us as much flexibility there. There's only a few options. But
well, anyway, yes, I know, but it's not an Act. It's a discussion paper, effectively, and we haven't seen the legislation. So I think there's certainly room for us.
It's not rolling just yet.
I mean, just responding to that, those of you voting out to read the LG and said it's definition of that. There's a whole range of quite considered input into the different models and in fact functions of what a CTB would be doing. So I think there's it's at that submission stage.
Thank you. And then I've got another one, if that's all right. And now it's in the paper and the agenda is page 161. So there's two parts to this. One, it's the functions and responsibilities and activities of QLDC, particularly in light of the events in Tauranga that Molinui fortnight ago. That's not listed there, although environment is, but hazard and emergency management statutory requirements under both, well, to some extent the Local Government Act, but in particular the RMA and the the Environment Bill, but also the CDM Act, which has a set of responsibilities. I would have thought that hazard and risk, perhaps emergency management, they are statutory responsibilities of this authority. We are seeing again and again around the country that local authorities have not taken those responsibilities seriously enough, and as a result, people are dying. So I'd like us to, if we can, might add to that, and I would suggest that we go above financial management because that's the bottom line. Something along those lines. Do you think that might help be useful?
So I don't see any reason. I mean, the list is not exclusive,
No.
so it's by way of example, but we can certainly make provision and reference sort of offence and emergency management in that area. Bearing in mind that obviously we play a particular role vis-a-vis the ORC and the regional response as well.
Which might be our responsibility.
Which might be ours in a couple of months' time, who knows, or a couple of years.
So, thank you. Then the other part of that was in relation to, I think page 164, when it talks about the boundaries for elections. Is it necessary, and it's different in the later version, but do we need to have all of the content there about what the wards are when we could, and could we just say that the boundaries for the wards for the forthcoming elections will be the same as they were for 2025, because I don't envisage there's any change, and that would be a simplification of local government.
No, we can't.
We can only talk about what was.
Well, I think we have to be explicit, and I think we will have an electoral review before then.
Okay.
Actually, that we have to address.
Thank you.
27 will be
Yeah.
representation.
Yeah, and I think that just for clarity's sake, the reason why we get down to mesh block levels is exactly that, because those populations are quite finite in terms of getting the balance towards the plus and minus 10%.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
I was next. Sorry, just a couple of clarifications. The corrections for the freedom camp bylaw, they are really just correcting errors and omissions to follow the intent of what bylaw says.
Yes, we're not changing them.
Just so there's an awareness that we're not altering the bylaw, so that people know that this isn't.
No, it's consistent with the direction and intent. It's where mapping and physical descriptions haven't matched properly.
Yep, that's good. And the other query was in the governance statement. There's a section in there about the Board of Services CCO and board and panel. Does that need to be updated following today's?
Where is that?
Page 179.
Did that change in the other one?
So it's talks about what might happen today, and now that it's happened, does it need to be updated in there? Not,
it's in the next report, wouldn't it?
It's not a report so much as a 3-year statement.
Yes, we can. I think we can update that just to reflect the current status.
Yeah. Okay.
My only question was number 17, approved prioritisation. I did go up, and there is a heading quite far, like 3 pages up, recommendations from the board. But can you just explain, or maybe someone from the board can? So we're approving the prioritisation, as in, if there's money, can we please put these in? Is that what this is?
So my understanding, to be fair, is that the Wellington Community Board and our members here have identified what their priorities and preferences would be about where, if money was available, they would like to see projects advance. And this is really just reflecting that this is council acknowledging their wish list, if that's the right phraseology, and to help shape some of the response that we've been making.
And is the wish list in order
I
of importance?
So,
No, it wasn't supposed to be.
It wasn't.
Generally.
I mean,
It kind of is, but it's
yeah.
technically not.
No.
It's early days.
I think the intent from the board was to try and set clear intentions around what the priorities are, how we deliver on those, and the workload that goes behind them is something to be considered.
Okay.
I guess it just is a way of highlighting to all councillors, what the things need to
Yes, it implies no acceptance of that, and I don't think acceptance is being asked for by the.
It's improved and.
Well, the way it's worded, I think it's slightly problematic.
Well, we should probably just save that for discussion, for just questions.
Yes.
Yes.
we can do that. Good point.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just item 9, clarification on the hearing panel and how members are selected for that going forward. Did we volunteer or?
Voluntold, it's called voluntold, because it's in your ward.
Was that the process always?
Was there a conversation?
No.
An earlier conversation today.
So just a clarification of how we want to do that.
Yes.
What?
Oh, you mean
what
going
say yes to?
To that, we need to have a process for doing.
Ah,
that.
yes, okay.
Yeah, and Mark, you'll be able to speak to, or maybe John, about that stuff. Developing that policy at the moment.
Oh, I think we just need an agreement.
So I think what we were working on was, in the last council, was making sure that there was a sort of a reasonable spread of people being appointed to things. So ensuring that people weren't overloaded, ensuring that people weren't shirking their responsibilities and the joys of hearing panel. So I can't comment exactly on why this group was selected. John may be able to comment on this.
Does governance make that decision? Yeah.
Yes, there's a process that we've been following the end of the last training that we had run by the mayor recently, which has a set of criteria which are maybe dependent on how many times you've served on a hearing panel. And of course, the term obviously no one has yet served on a hearing panel. So one of the criteria came into play. One of those criteria is diversity of board messages of board specific issue. In this case, it was a board specific issue, and so the 4 members of that board were the ones who were nominated, and we did consult with the mayor to check whether or not he was comfortable with that approach. And we can share those criteria with everyone.
But Matt, either way you're on it, because you're the chair of community and services as well.
Say again?
I said either way you're on it because you're chair of community and services.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how many submissions there actually are on it.
Just a question. So if you hypothetically speaking hadn't got as far as that agenda item, would you have known you were elected for that panel group? I guess I'd just like to, if we could say, if we are being nominated for panels, let us know.
Or an email, yeah, just a heads up.
Yeah, that's point. Yeah.
That's probably what I was alluding to.
Not that I would never give the.
Was it the agenda? That's hard.
First thing you turn to.
But my agent doesn't. It's a warm move there, you know, I might miss something important.
Yeah.
So that, it does get back to what we were talking about earlier in the day. I think that, would it be possible to have a conversation? You know, when the criteria is applied, being applied, because someone just might not be available, or they might have a conflict of interest. It'd be good to have that conversation before it lands in an agenda.
We can change them easily in an agenda, these that like,
I think the point's well made that, you know, I mean, this was a process that we've been trying to do. I think the right principle is there. But yes, if this is the first time that council has seen that they've been voluntold, then that's probably not a good thing. So we can try and insert that, so we would always check with the mayor, and then basically, then we could go and check with those councillors to make sure they're comfortable. Because if people are uncomfortable, feel conflicted, we would rather that was daylighted well before it got into print.
And for full disclosure, I read it first on the agenda as well.
No, all good, all good. No, that's fine.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I like to talk about the 17, because I agree with I've got an issue with that. But just on the triennial agreement, over the years, lots of stuff gets progressed behind the scenes in these forums. There's a lot of work goes on that we don't see or hear. Number of big projects have been progressed. So, look, the triennial agreement says at all levels, cross-council groups, so that could be the Mayoral Forum, the CE Forum, Hui for Otago, joint committees, working groups, advisory groups and staff working groups, they all must ensure appropriate, and that's what that is, communication with councils. And And it also says they can progress opportunities in council's shared interests within given mandates. Now, health stuff, there was other stuff prior. We haven't gotten used to working in this space, I don't think. You know, checking in on making sure that there are mandates. The Mayoral Forum, the Mayoral Forum webpage is a new thing that was new last triennium, which is great, but it only covers the Mayoral Forum and those sort of minutes and what it does. So I guess I'm not going to try to mute anything, but I guess my challenge to the mayor working in that space and our chief executive or new chief executive, interim chief executive, is to look at how those parts of the triennial agreement cannot get lost and putting in place some sort of structure so that we see more of the reporting. Any reports from the CE Forum to the Mayoral Forum, they should be on the website. So maybe use the website to put more information in there so that we can understand what's going on. Sorry, that was not a question.
But in response to the question, which is how is that tracked? And I think as you know, being part of the discussions as to what goes into this, I think it's it's actually quite hard to find lots of things that relate to all of the councils in Otago. So yeah, we come back to the transport, waste, biodiversity, so quite narrow areas. I mean, because every council's doing lots of there's things happening to need and have no impact relation to what happens here, and vice versa. So I think that there's a good focus on core things and ones that relate to established groups across the region, the CDM or the Otago Regional Transport Committee. So I think there's the scope of that is probably narrower than it could have been. But I think it was intentionally done that way to make it focused. I don't have a problem with the triennial agreement itself. What I'm saying is in the implementation of it by coming together and creating these groups, because that's what this enables, we've got to create some transparency at that level because we need to be transparent at council level. But the stuff that's going on above us in this space, it needs to be more open to the public. We need to know what's going on and things need to be brought back to us for mandates to progress. We've got a range of committees that would form a natural home for that reporting back and sort of. No, this is what's happening in others. Oh, you mean? Oh, I see what you mean. So if you're concerned about the staff on the Otago Waste Network, then there's a governance avenue to inquire about those and to ask for reporting or minutes or. I think it would need to be proactive because you don't know what you don't know. So these things are all operating outside of our area. Just proactively direct stuff to the right place and maybe put some of the CE Forum stuff on the website would be helpful. Yeah, thanks.
Happy to move.
I'll second this.
Any discussion?
Just on point 17, I'd be interested in changing the wording from approve the prioritisation of these projects, which have not been consulted on by the board, but it was a chance to get things moving because obviously the LTP and annual plan processes are moving forward. But we haven't checked in anyway, so maybe the wording could reflect what's written further up in the report at point 46 and say approve prioritisation of these projects for consideration in the draft annual plan.
Which is what has come from the board. So this is acknowledging that this information's come from the board. There's a report that's come from the board that reflects the full nature of the recommendation. So
yeah, totally, but it's not referenced in here. I mean,
it doesn't need to be because it's its own report. It's literally a report from the community board.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to stop here. We are talking for the sake of talking at this point, and I'm sorry. It's that is clearly it is identifying that a report has been received from the community board that identifies their priority. That report is a complete report.
But I'm just
it doesn't need any clarification
in the resolution itself.
So we just have to receive it, don't we? We don't need to approve it.
It is. It's the report itself. It is. It stands alone. It's been acknowledged in the chief executive's
receive
report.
it. Sorry, but we agree what we agree in words, and what we're agreeing is that we're approving the prioritisation of these projects in the annual plan. Read the words. So I don't have any issue with the intent, but it could get confusing for members of the public if we don't write it in as intended. So I'm not prepared to sit here and agree that I'm approving these projects for prioritisation, for consideration in the draft annual plan, sure. But it's a step too far in terms of the wording, I think.
So,
I don't-
gonna, maybe think on our feet about a clarification.
Change the
because
word to recommend, because that's what the committee board are doing,
it
is
would
recommending
be-
the prioritisation of those things.
If you looked at that decision in isolation, then you could say that is the prioritisation. Is that prioritisation against all other projects? Is it prioritisation against any, so are we, so I hear and understand the councillor's concern for clarity. And I think we've received the Upper Luther Community Board's prioritisation.
Yeah.
And so it's how we reflect that in the approval part of.
Well, we just say recommend the prioritisation of these projects rather than approve.
Well,
So it's been moved, someone needs to move an amendment if we want to look.
Well, I'm trying to get to a closure on this is the point.
Yeah.
Well, I proposed and look, I can do it officially, but I was just looking to see whether it would be adequate if other people had concerns. But it's about not fettering future decision making or making it, sending staff off to go, yep, these are the ones. And, maybe in this order or whatever, I don't know. It's a bit vague. So,
So if councillors are mind to avoid any suggestion that they had effectively agreed these, then you could simply receive the prioritisation recommendation.
that would be much better.
That's probably.
I'm happy to move that.
I'll second that.
Yes, so we've got amendment moved and seconded, which is to item 17, replace the word approve with receive.
Yeah, we've removed the original, the amended
Okay,
motion.
with that change,
Yep.
We've just gone back and removed the amended motion.
Okay, discussion on the proposed amendment.
Since you moved
They
it.
don't need to, they moved it, I think.
We're
we
just,
changed
we're just,
it.
we're just rescinding the original one and moving it again.
And then we agree to it because
Yeah, it's fine. It doesn't need
Okay.
Right, so any more discussion on the items? Or we've had a move, proposal to move to vote, haven't we? Who?
it was moved by councillor Smith, seconded by councillor Mitchell.
Yep. Yeah, okay, so are we ready to move to a vote? Okay, all those in favour? Aye. Against? Fantastic, well done. Okay, so that is the end of the public part of this meeting, and so we are now going to move into public excluded, and that is in respect of confirmation of minutes and recruitment agency services, both of which were held in public excluded. Yep, so in terms of I'll move that we go to public excluded. Somebody second that to councillor Bartlett. Vote on that.